Welcome to Can't Recommend Enough. On today's show, and I'm so excited, we have Josh and Jessie from the Slice by Slice Horror Podcast. And this was a blast because we're just talking all about our love of horror movies. We had so much fun gushing over the little things that just make horror as a genre so great. And this is for all you noobs out there and all the people that are on the fence about horror. But also true horror fans, I think you're going to really love the breakdowns that we got. We really did enjoy ourselves making this episode. It was so much fun. And also I made it for another reason, which I'll get into once this episode starts. But please enjoy. There's a lot of great recommendations in here, and see if you feel the same way. And hopefully if you've never seen any of these movies that we're talking about, you check them out. Enjoy it. The reason for this episode is I have a friend, a good friend, and we were talking one day and the conversation got on horror. And he blew my mind by saying that he is not into horror, or not that he's not into horror. He just doesn't get it. And rather than end our friendship right there, I figured I'd try to enlighten him, which I tried and failed to do. Like I went off on a tangent and I realized I'm making no sense. I'm talking to a brick wall here. It's in my wheelhouse, but I can't eloquently explain it, right? Without sitting him down, Clockwork Orange style, and keeping his eyes propped open and making him watch stuff. So this episode is for him. And then I also realize if he can't be the only one, there's got to be other people out there that don't get horror and understand why it is so awesome. And also for the new people to horror, who rather than wade through all the trash out there, because there are a lot of bad horror movies, we're going to give them some great pieces of work to check out. And hopefully we can breed a lot more horror fanatics out there. And the way that we're going to do it is just by gushing about our love for horror. So thank you guys for being on the show, and let's get down to it and just talk some horror for all the people out there. My first thought, though, is there's a starting point, and I want to know for you guys, what is your earliest horror memory?
So this is Jessie. I guess I'll go first. I have a sister that is 11 years older than me, and I grew up in the 80s, so she'd have to babysit me when my parents would go out. When Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and everything was coming out, and she'd have her friends over. And I wouldn't stay in bed, so I got to hang out when I was like 5 and 6 and watch these slasher flicks, and I just got hooked on them then. And that was my jumping board for horror right there myself.
I think, hey, Jessie, I think you're just like me. Like, we grew up in the perfect era where they were on TV at the time, and
right.
And our parents, for whatever reason, weren't there to fully watch some of the stuff that you were watching on cable. And or like you said, older sister, I had one too. She wasn't that big into horror, but I remember, like, I think it was like HBO, like awesome stuff on there. And just like you, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, like those were the entry points. What about you, Josh?
Well, for me, I grew up pretty poor, and we rarely had cable, which led to what I refer to as the Jesus tapes. Mm-hmm. So there was a handful of horror movies that my dad had recorded, like off of HBO, but then my parents would get on a religious kick and record over them with Jimmy Swaggart. So that kind of sucked. And later on, I was kind of a late bloomer into the genre, really. In my early teens, I ended up living with an aunt and my older cousin, who worked at this place called the Video Barn and Book Basket. And I had access to all these screeners, and it just blew open from there with a lot of bad stuff at first, like all the full moon stuff and shit like that. And really got
I don't even think I've ever seen Full Moon. Like, what is that? Is that
that's
Werewolf
like
Doll
Man? Yeah, so like Doll Man and the Demonic Toys, Puppet Master,
all right,
all that shit.
Yeah, and, I haven't seen those in years, but I remember them being bad.
Yeah, mostly. And that's when it started to take off. And once I discovered Nightmare on Elm Street, it was over. And of course, at some point in my youth, I know I saw Poltergeist. And those are two of the biggest ones, because it's the same thing. Being born at the right time to at least catch some of the stuff as the late 80s boom happened. It's lost today. Nobody's going to get to experience it like that again.
No,
because there's so much saturation now. But that's pretty much where it took off and got solidified with me.
And then I don't know if I said this before, but Josh and I are cousins, and we're only a few months apart, and we grew up together as well. So I really got into horror in my teenage years. So like every birthday party I had was horror movie night, like stack of VHS tapes, just hammering through them. Anytime he'd get to come stay over at my house, just breaking out the horror films. And I mean, we got into that like as our teenage years grew, to the point where I always thought I was going to go to film school and be a horror director. And we were just talking about this the other day. We have VHS tapes somewhere we're trying to find where we had covered his parents' house in Bisqueen, and we were just like making special effects and gutting each other and stuff, and just having a blast. Yep. And it was a love that we grew into together. And, you know, as we got older, I mean, hell, Josh had his wedding on Halloween. His wife's in his house looks like a haunted house year round. It's pretty awesome. And we love to really celebrate this together and talk about bad movies. And that's how we got together to start our podcast. Because hell, we've been sitting on a couch together talking about horror movies, gushing over them for decades. Let's do it and record it, right? And like you said, get more people involved, right?
Yeah. And that's what's great about horror. I think of any other genre is when you find those horror fans and you just talk about all the greats and all. Even you can bond over the pure garbage out there too, like how bad it was. But I love that you mentioned Poltergeist, because that's something right there that, if you think about it, it's Tobe Hooper who did, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, that in and of itself is pretty awesome that he did this big studio movie, but also that Steven Spielberg had a hand in it and guiding him. And even like the whole vibe of Steven Spielberg seeped into that movie as well, you know, because of his hands-on approach and guidance. And it's just awesome. And that's a pure 80s movie right there. And it's so rad.
Well, and it covers the full spectrum because of both of their involvement. And we talked about it when we've done that on an episode. And Jessie even said it's the tale of two openings. Like, here's the Hooper opening of the film, and then we move over into the Spielberg opening of the film. And but as far as getting people into horror, my God, that's almost the perfect movie, because it's not a gorehound film, but it has gorehound moments. It is wonderfully written and shot, and from the family dynamic to the drama that ensues there, without it being a drama flick, there's a lot of humor in it. That's friggin' awesome movie as far as encapsulating a lot of why the horror genre is so beloved, because it can go so many directions at the same time, and when it's properly tethered, it always works.
And
then you can find all these like horror comedy films as well, right? And things like that, like your Cabin in the Woods and your Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and hell, even Scream, if you want to go back to that. And you can find people who don't know they're into horror yet, but you think they might like it, and you can use these movies that take horror and mix it with something else and just kind of throw it at them and maybe trick them and ambush them a bit and not let them know what they're watching.
that is good. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. And you can see them just kind of gravitate towards it because they stick to things that are more in their wheelhouse, you know?
I think if you're taking that approach, you might be able to start with Evil Dead 2. Because by the time they get to Army of Darkness, it has lost all the horror elements of it. But those movies are just so much fun, especially. Right. I can't even say especially Evil Dead 2, because they're both equally as fun.
Yes,
and it's different. It's a complete like 180 from the first movie. And what I like, you know, you really don't. And I don't know about you guys, but in horror franchises, you don't really see too much of like a big change in a character. Like, you'll see it maybe in the first movie, how they're maybe meek, and by the end they're a little bit more strong. But what I love about Evil Dead is Ash starts out as a regular guy, and by Army of Darkness, he just doesn't give a fuck anymore. He's just so over it, and he's just this totally different guy who just doesn't care for anybody, and his whole thing is just getting home. I want to be done with this, like get out of my way. And it's just the funniest thing because the whole time, and the joke was that Sam Raimi is just torturing him throughout all three movies and trying to up that ante of putting him through as much shit as he can.
Yeah, that's it. Especially by the time you get to Army of Darkness and fucking Bruce Campbell.
Yes.
The arrogance of, I've seen this shit before, you haven't, shut the fuck up and let me work. But you don't hate the guy because you're like, yeah, I sat through the first two. I know what's up.
And really, he'd been through a lot of shit. I mean, he lost his sister and all his friends, and then he goes back in time, to a time that he just despises because he's like the smartest guy there, at least in his mind.
Which is just bad
Jessie
to say
and I are
in its own
both
right.
massive Evil Dead fans. So yeah, that's one we always come back to. That goes back
Those
to
were
watching
regularly
stuff over
broke out at the birthday parties, right?
Yeah, he's like, dude, I got to show you these movies, and I'm like, okay.
I also had one of the most massive trauma video collections you could have ever seen back in the VHS days. Ended up giving them to an old drummer of ours because I got sick of repairing VCRs to make them play. But I had a giant bookshelf that was almost the entire trauma library in VHS, and I started collecting it at like 16 or something, right? And you could just go up there and grab like a Toxic Avenger movie or Class of Nukem High, Romeo and Juliet, just whatever you could think of, man, and just pull it off.
You got to give Sergeant Kabuki Man some love.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Sergeant Kabuki Man. And honestly,
you hear me now, Kimasabi?
And honestly, my trauma collection, I don't give it enough credit, even on our own podcast. But that is probably a huge part of it too, because I saw slasher movies real early with my sister. But we all grew up with the USA Up All Night with Rhonda Shear, right? And Gilbert Godfrey, and they just played, trauma flicks and horror movies and stuff. And I would just collect them on VHS. I was even that guy that was like a video store manager at one point, right? So I just like bring piles of tapes home when we were growing up. And it's just, there's just so much fun stuff out there. The horror section of a video store was the best aisle to walk down and just randomly pick stuff off of the cover. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All the way. It's funny. And stop me if I'm wrong here, but I read something about trauma that I never considered. And I think this was about them, how they are kind of in a way responsible for a lot of the not them producing them, but people that came out of trauma that worked for trauma and went on to create great movies, like great horror movies. Is that
James Gunn?
Am I reading that right?
James Gunn started out trauma.
Yeah. Yep. I think that was the article about. Yes. And look at what he's done, man. Awesome dude.
Yep. And that's the whole thing. And what's interesting going into trauma is, that's very, very horror adjacent. And you were talking about, the fans of the horror genre. You run into a lot of people that really care about the behind the scenes and the creativity and the drive and determination. It's a lot of low budget grassroots DIY shit. And I think that's why so many of the fans are so tied to it, because it feels raw. Like you get more exposure into that, and it's not what I call the $1 billion bullshit that we have today. And Trauma is a great example of the same damn thing, where it's all schlock and action and with a little bit of horror in it. But when straight to video came along, Lloyd Kaufman just fucking said, yes, this is what I'm going to do. Fuck all my education. And went for it. And that's the attitude that you see in a lot of early horror, and what makes it so special, because there's heart and soul in it, like punk rock.
Yes. And I mean, you're talking about raw, like how much more raw can you get than Texas Chainsaw Massacre or the first Evil Dead? Like, those movies shot on shoestring budgets and they pulled it off. And even Night of Living Dead, man, look at the success that has had just by, how much did they shoot it for? Like $10,000 or something?
Yeah, it was $10,000. Yeah.
$10,000. which was probably not cheap at the
Not
time.
much. I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And
and they forgot to put that copyright stamp on there. Man.
I know.
And now everybody can play it for free.
Jeez, man. I mean, that's got to sting a little bit, right?
It has to. And, but that's another fun one that, they didn't know what a turning point in cinema that was at the time. It's just like, this is what we're doing. And that's another fun thing to look back on. On horror in general is when the tropes really came into their being and as they go on, and like Jessie brought up earlier, Cabin in the Woods as coming at it from a comedy angle for an outsider. Like there's so much in there that's just gushing for the true fans too. And I don't know, just love horror.
Well, we were talking about different directors and stuff earlier. On our podcast, we'll like rotate like a subgenre, a director, and a franchise, right? And that's just kind of like our system that we go to keep it fresh. And there's so many times that we come around to this horror director and you start thinking about like how they're this huge blockbuster action director now, right? And it's because like you have to be so creative to make these horror flicks with so little money. It was Sam Raimi. James Wan, he's one of the most profitable directors of all time, right? Like James Gunn started with horror. Joss Whedon, like all these guys started out with horror. And I mean, hell, look, Peter
Ridley
Jackson.
Scott.
Yeah, Ridley Scott. Yeah, Peter Jackson did Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and everything. And he started out making horror flicks. And you have these guys that are just so passionate about it and they want to do it.
What are the gorgeous
has always touched on horror back in the day.
Yes. Dude, Brain Dead I remember seeing that in high school and I was like, holy shit. It started out kind of boring, but once it went off the rails, it went off the rails. And
that's one of those flicks that I saw it like on TV, like I'm flipping channels on a Saturday night on like HBO or Cinemax or something, and I hit the lawnmower in the party room scene, right? Best. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And there wasn't a guide back then, right? So you had to actually pick the TV guide up off the table and flip through and see what it was. And then I'm like, when's that coming on next? Because I'm watching it. And that's, the next thing came on, I watched it from the beginning, and I love Dead Alive. It's just a fantastic movie.
See, that was one that for me at my cousin's video store that I picked up based on the box with the mouth being pulled open and the skull inside. And it's like, what is this? And
wait, did I say Brain Dead? Is that the original version?
It's the same movie, just in
branded.
The States.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the name was already taken overseas somewhere. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to go back to Cabin in the Woods because when that movie came out, I did not care for it.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. Because for a while there, I got out of horror because a lot of the movies that were coming out in like the 2000s were just so bad. They always had these like, you're talking about tropes. Like they were playing every kind of trope you could do. And the big one was always those jump scares, and I knew they were coming all the time. Like I don't get how people can still be scared by jump scares, like the classic cat jumping out, when it's coming, they build the tension and then the music stops. And then that's where they get you with that, that jump scare, the false thing, and then they finally get you with the killer after that. It's been overdone. So a lot of these movies, and then remember in the 2000s, more like late 90s, 2000s, they started putting out a lot of PG-13 stuff, and that was a sin for me against horror, or a strike against horror. It's like I understand you're doing it so you can get more money out of the box office, but at the same time, it's like for the gore hounds. You can only do so much in PG-13. So I knew I wasn't going to get what I'm used to. And then I found a lot of these movies just weren't really that good. And when Cabin in the Woods came out, I watched it because Joss Whedon was associated with it, with Drew Goddard. I liked the idea of it, but I didn't love the movie. But I watched it again recently and I fell in love with it. And I'm like, what was I thinking? This was great, man. Like, I should have liked it at the time, but I guess I was just in that headspace that I had been let down so many times. I saw the reason for the movie then, and I really liked the idea. I thought it was great, but I guess I just thought that the camp wasn't as good as it was. But now that I watch it, I'm like, it is actual great camp. It's perfect. It makes sense for the movie,
And it takes like all the old tropes, like the good tropes, and it like this is why this happens. It's because it's rigged, and it has a lot of fun with that. And then at the end, it's just a fucking gore
so
fest.
awesome at the end. Yes.
Yeah, and even getting into the very end, which I hate happy endings, and it gets to the very end, and it's like fuck it. And I have to real quick say the first time I saw that movie, because I missed out on it when it came out, and I was dating my now wife, and my friend was going to bring it over. He's like, I'm going to bring this movie over that I think you'll really like. And he comes over, and she's like, oh, you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen Cabin in the Woods. And keep in mind, I've never watched Buffy either at this point.
I haven't either.
And well, this is the thing. We watched the movie. I turned to my wife, and I'm like, how the fuck did I miss out on this? And she goes, how the fuck have you not watched Buffy? And I was like, what does that have to do with this? She's like, it's the same fucking guy.
Now, have you watched Buffy because of it?
Yes.
Okay. The TV show or the first movie?
The TV show. I had watched the movie because of Jessie. Okay. But I hadn't watched the show other than a little bit over at your house. And we sat down and binged it after this. And there's a lot of that I like. But yeah, Cabin in the Woods fucking blew me away. And it was just like you said, man, it was coming off of all the PG-13 bullshit that it was so refreshing.
It was.
I love all horror, but I've always been a big slasher guy and vampires a lot when I was a kid. So poor Josh would have to just watch any vampire shit that I had at the house.
There's a lot of
whenever
bad
new Halloween
vampires.
movie came out. Oh, there is. I agree. But it's like, and now we're going to watch the movie where Pee Wee Herman's a vampire. Come on, let's do it.
You know what, though? I love that movie. And I know the story behind it being that they totally did Josh dirty and changed his whole story, and that's why he did the show. But I thought it was great. You got Luke Perry and Christy Swanson.
David Arquette.
Yeah,
Christy Swanson. Rutger Howard, right? Like it's so many good people in that.
Yes, it was cool.
Yep,
definitely. I was just thinking, like, you're talking about vampires. I have another movie that didn't, and I was when I was talking to Josh before you got on, Jesse, I was telling him I have one that I want to really talk to you guys about, and I'm glad we kind of segue into this from Cabin in the Woods. But when John Carpenter's Vampires came out, when I saw it in the theater, did not care for it. And
really.
Yes, I don't know. Maybe it's because it came out so close to From Dusk Till Dawn, which is hard to beat, dude. From Dusk Till Dawn is like still one of my favorite movies. It's like the best vampire movie, But Vampires, I remember liking the opening. I thought it was great, but I didn't really. I don't think I cared too much for the movie as a whole. So I saw it on Prime the other day, and I was like, you know what? I've been forcing myself to rewatch stuff to see if I still feel the same way. And I love John Carpenter. Let me just watch this again because I love James Woods, and and I got to give it a second chance because I know the beginning is good. So what I was struck by right away was the cinematography was awesome. Like I was like, wow, this movie is actually really well done. Like beautiful shot work. The opening is still great. And then when Valak comes to the motel, I was like, yes, still rad. And then I was like, okay, any moment now I'm going to start to hate this movie. And the opposite happened. And I just loved the movie with every minute that passed. And I was like, what was I thinking? This movie is so awesome. James Woods, Jack Crow is such a badass. He has the best dialogue. Yes. And this is a movie that was like made for me because yes, it is just so cool. And I don't think a lot of people out there know about John Carpenter's Vampires, or maybe they read terrible reviews, but are you guys fans? Like, how do you feel about it? Being the vampire
I love that
expert.
one. That was one of my movies when we did, because we've done 2 or 3 vampire episodes on our show, and that's one of the movies I covered. I like to go see horror movies in theaters opening weekend if I can. I like to hear everybody screaming around me as we go. It's part of the fun, right? Everybody wants everybody to shut up in the movie theater. I want to hear people crying and yelling, "Look behind you!" And I saw that one in theaters, and I really liked it because I felt like it had that dirty, dark, like near dark style
another
movie, right?
great
Like
one.
that I hadn't seen.
Mm-hmm.
And to see it from like the vampire hunter's point of view, and they're basically like bikers. In a way, it's a Western, right? I think we said that on the podcast.
Totally.
So, Josh, it's a vampire Western movie. And John Carpenter is one of the masters of horror, and he did it. And he had a great, strong lead for, with James Woods for the, to be the hero, if you want to call him the hero. I mean, he's kind of like a jackass in the movie, but he's
total
gets
dick,
the job done.
but he's great.
Exactly. But it makes it more realistic, right? Like, I feel like every part of it was realistic. And anytime you try to tie in like Christianity into the origin for horror, it just works so well together. A lot of
it
times
worked
too.
really well in that, man.
Right.
They created
because you got all this backstory.
Yes.
And it's I don't know. It's a fun movie, and it's the fights are just badass in it. And I don't think anything's over the top. It doesn't go into what I like to call haction. Like, it doesn't go into that like Resident Evil style. This is just an action movie that happens to have monsters in it. It stayed a horror movie from the beginning while still having really good fights. And I can't remember, Josh, was that one of them that you thought you hated until you had to watch it for the podcast, or did you always like
it? It was one that I had never actually seen all the way through until the podcast. And yeah, I was impressed by it, and it's got more depth and width than I think casual moviegoers would give it credit for, especially going into, the religious angle of, well, we were trying to do this, and we really fucked up.
Big time.
And it reaches out in all directions, like I was talking about earlier, and makes sure that it tickles all those spots and makes it cohesive. And like Jessie said, he's the big time vampire guy. I'm okay with vampires. I'm not. It's not like top of my list. Same thing with zombies. I'm so burnt out on zombies right now. Like every time we talk about it on the podcast, it's like we don't need to do that right now.
Well, I can agree with you on that. Real quick before we get into that, I because you mentioned Near Dark, which I think everybody should see. And we talked about directors who got into big time action movies. Catherine Bigelow, Near Dark,
exactly.
Look at where she's gone from there. Just amazing films after that. Just killing it. But zombies, yes, there was this big kind of zombie renaissance, and everybody's kind of doing it, and it was overdone, especially with Walking Dead. But Train to Busan and Hashtag Alive were actually really cool. I saw a French one too, of a guy trapped in his apartment as well, like after a party. Like he woke up the next day from a party and everything had gone to shit. It was actually really cool. I can't remember the name of it, but it's on Netflix.
So familiar. Okay.
I was like, say that sounds familiar as well. I'm gonna have to look at that. But Train to Busan, in the midst of me being so zombied out, and I cannot stand subtitles. I hate movies, and that it sucked me right in because the wife put it on, and I'm like, I'll give it a chance, and then I'm gonna dick around on my phone, and I actually sat and watched the movie.
It was fucking awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man,
I actually haven't
good.
seen that one. That's one of the few recent big horror movies I haven't seen.
Get on Netflix after we're done and watch that. It is so good.
The sequel's coming out, right? Peninsula, is it out
sequel's
yet?
out.
It's out, yeah. Has it been actually released in America yet? I don't know.
Let's just say, I don't know if it's been released in America, but the wife and I watched it. We'll just put it that way.
I love some zombie movies, but like as a whole, that's probably one of my least favorite subgenres of horror. And I feel like it's just so overdone, and even before like the Walking Dead craze, I just feel like it was always like the go-to. Night of the Living Dead, like I always loved that movie. It is always one of my top favorites. I remember watching Lucio Fulci's Zombie Into the Ground when we were teenagers, Josh, but I haven't seen that in forever. I remember this Fangoria movie, I think it was called I, Zombie, and it had nothing to do with that recent CW
I was going to bring that
show. But it was like a zombie movie made by Fangoria in late 90s, early 2000s. I just remember it was a guy in college on like a science trip, and he was messing with like a fungus or something. I might be misremembering part of this because I haven't seen this since I was a teenager, but it's basically his diary as he's slowly starting to rot and fall apart in his house.
That's
right?
pretty interesting.
And get this like hunger for things. And I remember liking that one, but I just, and Dead Alive's awesome, but to me, it's not like fully a zombie movie. It just happens to have zombies in it, you know? And past that, I just feel like a lot of the times it's just, it's like vampire movies. You can there's so many shitty vampire movies out there, right?
Yes.
And I feel like they've done that with zombies, and I don't always get into them as much. But I don't know.
What are your thoughts on Dawn of the Dead?
I love Dawn of the Dead. The remake, the original, which one? Are you talking about both?
Well, both.
They're both good movies.
They're both good.
Yeah.
The original is one of my favorites of all time. But I think we needed to touch on those movies, and the reason is because of the lasting impact that they've had in horror in general. Not just because of them, but because of Tom Savini being the horror effects master who took Greg Nicotero under his wing, and Greg Nicotero went on to form K&B, which, from like, we were just talking about vampires, the special effects in that, from Dusk Till Dawn, they've done so many cool movies. The practical
we're huge
effects,
K&B fans.
yes, they are the kings.
All the Evil Dead movies. I mean,
yeah, dude, they kill it, man. And you got to think if Dawn of the Dead never happened. I watched this interview with Greg Nicotero, and he said that he made a point as a young man to go out there to Monroeville Mall to meet Tom Savini to learn from him. And he did, and his dad was pushing him to be a doctor. And he's like, no, I want to do horror special effects and makeup and stuff. And look what happened because of that, that fateful moment, how much it's changed the face of the genre, and then, he's doing Walking Dead as well, dude. Like, I mean, those are all his effects. It's just nuts. Like how far the effects have come in horror and just the mark that it leaves on everything else too. Cause I mean, they're just not known for horror, but they do so many other different types of movies. Where, if you've seen a special effect, it's probably them. And you're like, whoa, that's pretty neat.
And not everybody realizes that before Night of the Living Dead and that whole trilogy, that zombie basically only referred to somebody under mind control magic from a voodoo person, right? Like it was not a walking corpse, right? And yet George Romero invent this, and you had this move into Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and then just start spawning all these sequels. And like you have a whole genre that is one of the, I mean, it's gone downhill, but one of the biggest TV shows of all time was Walking Dead, all based off of zombies created by George Romero. And then you have all these people like the guys from K&B and Tom Savini and everybody who have all worked together. And then the amount of times that we have to reference Tom Savini or K&B on our show for special effects, or it's like, oh, Berger did this from K&B. Like somebody's always there, and they're all just so tight-knit and close together, and it's just long-lasting. We always talk about practical effects so much better than CGI.
So much better.
Because they still look good 20 years down the road where old, 5-year-old CGI looks like shit, and these guys
especially
really knew what they were
CGI
doing.
blood. Terrible.
Yeah.
Yes.
We hate CGI blood. We talk shit about that all the time. Tom
worst.
Savini, he was a war photographer, right? During like Nam or something. And that's why he's like, they're like, what's your inspiration for, having this head cut off? And he's like, well, I've seen a guy with his head cut off before, and he took that, and there's a lot of people that have learned from him over time.
People make fun of his makeup in Dawn of the Dead, how it's blue, but because he had seen bodies, he's like, that's
what
kind
they
of
look
what they look like. Yes. It's that's what they look like, and that's how I made them. I mean, it's laughable now when you see the effects of today, but at the time, it was great. We also got to thank Tom Savini for Jason Voorhees too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The original, the kid version, right? Like originally.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, practical is always going to win out, and out of all the heavy hitters being brought up, we got to show Mark Sjostrom some love as well.
What has he done?
The guys from K&B actually used to work under him.
Oh, okay.
Before K&B was formed. So that's kind of where the birth of all that was. And it's kind of weird because you'll see Sjostrom pop up in some stuff. Something that comes to mind from recent episode, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, when Freddy actually burst out of Jessie. That whole thing was Mark Sjostrom.
So basically the coolest part in that whole movie.
There you go.
Because that is the odd duck of the series.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
We're
That's
actually
the season of the witch of the Nightmare on Elm Street series.
we're actually
we're-
recording episode 3 of our Nightmare on Elm Street franchise Sunday to come out next week. So we've done all the way up to Freddy's Dead. So we're doing Freddy's Dead and New Nightmare this
nice.
weekend. So this is very fresh in our mind. We've just gone through.
Yep.
What's each of your favorites?
Ooh.
Out of the franchise,
Yeah.
mine is always a
original.
dead tie for 1 and 3.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
Dream Warriors is just so good.
Yeah.
It
On
is
paper,
awesome.
I just said this recently, but on paper, I feel like Dream Masters seems like one of the better ones too. It just was not as well made. as Dream Warriors.
That was 4, right? With Patricia Arquette.
Yeah, it was 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Patricia Arquette was in 3, Dream Warriors.
Oh yeah, she
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking.
They
got
couldn't
replaced by
get
Tuesday
her
night.
back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those
There
are
was
great movies,
really
great
cool
effects.
in 4 when what was it that was it the chick that was the work she was working out and
Yeah, it
and
just turns into the roach.
Cockroach kill.
yeah
Mhm,
yep
mhm.
that was awesome. That was
Yep,
so
that
cool.
was
It's
Screaming
supposed
Mad
to be one of the
George.
top. Yeah, Screaming Mad George. That's supposed to be one of the top rated horror kills, like on most things online. Is that kill? But a lot of those movies were Showstrom, and then K&B guys started coming in as well.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if Evil Dead 1 or 2. One of them was Showstrom with these 3 guys working under him, and it was it was K&B before they were K&B, and they learned a lot from him as well. So his name's definitely got to be thrown in that hat.
Awesome. Yeah. It's the history is just so great, man. There's so much to learn. And I think, and this is another reason why I'm really glad I'm talking to you guys is because for the people that don't know that much about horror, like there is so much to dissect in it. I mean, even down to the behind the scenes of how they're made and the history behind where things started to where they've come, the people involved, and it's just so fascinating, especially the gore hounds. I mean, we love to know how those effects were done. And
Yes.
I remember, I think for me, what, cause some people get like really grossed out when they see certain effects, but I remember my stepdad as a kid, cause he's the one who showed me, Evil Dead, and like, they just weren't playing it on TV. I had no idea. And he's like, you got to watch this. So we watched Evil Dead. And then we watched Evil Dead 2, and I'm like, it's like the same movie. He's like, no. This one is really cool. And by the end, I loved it. And by the time Army of Darkness came out, we went to the theater to see that. We were like the only people in the theater, and it was amazing. But what he always said to me as a young man was like, look, see that effect right there? Like, this is how they would do it just by kind of looking at it. He's, and he would just call out the effects like, oh, Facus Wacus, like instead of like me being, afraid that these horrible, terrible things are happening, like people being ripped apart, he would call it out. And we became like guys that were like, we couldn't wait to see the next effect and like try to figure it out how it was done. And I think if
Horror
you look at it
films-
from that angle, yeah, go
Horror
ahead.
films always seem to have the best like special features and little mini movies about the making of and the docuseries. Like even the big movie, Star Wars movies, for example, and Marvel movies, they don't have as much. This is how we did this, and this is how we did that, and it's really cool that like. I don't know. It's like horror fans are all united in a way that they think in a way, right? And we all want to know how this stuff worked and how they did it. And they always tack that on there. That's why Scream Factory DVDs and Blu-rays are so badass because you get so many extra little series that they make for each of the special editions just so you can see how it's all made,
Mm-hmm. It's the best.
Like back when listening to Kevin Smith commentary talking about, well, I guess it's going to end up on the goddamn DVD, and that's how it is, and that's the whole story there is exactly right. That's a great way to explain it to a kid. Like, okay, well, it isn't real, and this is why, and it's like, well, that's fascinating. Now go show me a rom-com where there's something in that movie where you need to tell someone how to understand what they just saw on screen, other than showing them 2 dolls. It's not as intriguing and not as engaging.
No. Yeah. I guess I never looked at it that way. And that's, I guess, what makes horror so fascinating is you summed it up right there.
Well,
Besides being fun.
There's another element to it in a subconscious thing that I think where, and this is a pro and con, depending on the audience, the taboo factor. The same thing that's going to turn off the casual movie watcher is what's going to excite the person who's like, I'm not supposed to see this. I'm not supposed to be enjoying this child's shoe as it flies through the air because he was just hit by a truck. There's part of it that it's being able to tap into that without going out and killing people. And I'm not saying
about
that's
Gage.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that Pet Cemetery reference?
But it's one of those things where you know you're dabbling in something, and then the nervous laughter ends up being part of it, hence why we like, or at least me, like the comedy and the horror. And it's a safe haven to go explore all that. And then once the 85 minutes are up, it's over. And then you got other people that are like, oh God, you're sick. You actually enjoyed that? I
know.
And because they don't understand the release.
Yeah.
You just get looked at so weird when you're like a horror fan, you know. Sometimes it's like, I'm not crazy. I don't want to go out and hurt people. I just like watching these movies and being creeped out, you know?
Yeah. And I think, and I was trying to understand the psychology myself. And because if you look at the numbers, horror is big. It makes a lot of money. And they really tapped into that when we were talking about when they went PG-13 with a bunch of, they knew the market. If they could get rid of the hard R, if they could make it PG-13, and they took a chance, and it was a cash cow. I mean, those movies, and I think from that, it really kind of catapulted the genre to everybody else. So I think the reason why people go to horror movies is because there's a part of us that wants to be scared, but wants that safety of being able to leave at the end. You know, you're scared for a short amount of time, you have a reaction, but you're not in any real danger.
Yeah, just like a roller coaster. It's the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some roller coasters can kill you.
Technically.
They're just not supposed to.
Yes.
We've referenced that like PG-13 home because that ended 90s, early 2000s was just a bad time for horror in general. And it was real bad on slashers. We went into that once upon a time as well. But you hit this point where the movies were so bland because the things that made each movie so unique were either so dark or so gory that it could only be shown in a rated R movie. So you started getting all these little bland things that all they could do was jump scare stings, like you said earlier. And part of why horror is so profitable, it's the return on investment. It's not that they make, $1 billion a piece. It's that they make them for $3 million and then it makes $300 million. But when you get into this PG-13 category, they started having bigger actors and actresses in them. And the budgets were going up, but the profits were going down, and it almost tanked horror there for a while. I think another reason that you hear that like a lot of people don't like horror, so not a lot of people, but why you hear people say they don't like horror is sequels, man. Like I hate sequels for the most part. They kill everything. I bitch about them all the time. But when a horror movie comes out that's new and inventive, like starting in the 80s on up, you always heard about it. Everybody heard about it in all walks of life, even if you didn't listen to horror. Like, oh, you got to see Halloween. You got to see Nightmare on Elm Street. Like you would hear all these things, and then by the time these people get around to seeing it, they're like, oh, Halloween 3, let's watch this one. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to pick on Season of the Witch, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that happened a lot where people would hear so much about this horror movie and get it built up in their head, but they don't go back and watch the first one. They watch part 2 or part 3 where it's, the search for more money, right? And then it's just a shitty cash grab. And
which, by the way, we haven't gotten the search for more money yet.
We haven't.
I know. That's one of Josh's favorite quotes there. But Mel Brooks, like that's a genre, like all of his movies. They're exactly. It's not horror. I would love to see a Mel Brooks horror movie, but I guess he had Dracula Dead and Loving It. Yeah, I guess that kind of. But you won't ever meet a horror fan that doesn't like Spaceballs. I feel like, right? Like it's just something that ties everybody together, right? Like it's something we're all fucked up in the head the same way, right?
Well, and I got to ask you as a kind of a sounding board on this. We talked about this before in a recent episode when we did dark fantasy, where it seems like a lot of people that are into horror are into more of those niche genre flicks that most people don't even give a second glance.
Like what?
Labyrinth and Legend were two that we just did, yeah.
The Dark Crystal, stuff like that.
I can't remember Legend because it's been so long, but I did watch Labyrinth recently with my daughter, and awesome. So actually, let me kind of say, Jennifer Connelly's acting is really not that great in the movie, especially in the
That is my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of cringy. But the movie is just so cool. And Jim Henson, bless his soul, is just one of the greatest guys for what he's done, for the world of imagination. The stuff that he came up with still lives on today, which is beautiful. So
and it aged well. It looks really well. Practical effects, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Very practical and very good. And God, I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole with this.
Yeah. That whole off-kilter itch, there's something about that. Just speaking to finding that outside of horror.
Yeah.
And you don't get that in a lot of mainstream stuff. And like we keep coming back to, when the PG-13 thing was tried, it made money. But what happened was the horror fans, the hard R horror fans, it's like, oh, well, they'll go watch it and then they'll buy the unrated DVD. Well, I just watched the movie and I see where all the misses are. Why am I going to go pay more money to see what I already know is missing in the film? And that's when I stopped seeing PG-13 movies in theater. Yeah.
The funny thing about that is, I remember when they started doing that, and I was just like, "Oh my God!" Like, take Dawn of the Dead, the Zack Snyder remake. That had an unrated cut, but there wasn't that much more added into it. And I remember seeing where they added in with like a naked woman walking by a bus, covered in blood. So I think in the original cut, before they cut it out, they had a real live naked woman walking by, but when they restored it into the director's cut, they added digital blood to the window to obscure her nudity. And I'm like, why? It's supposed to be unrated, dude. Like, what are you doing? It's like little dumb things like that. I can see if you're totally changing the vibe of a movie, which, if we're talking about The Abyss, theatrical versus director's cut, you got to watch the director's cut. The theatrical was great when I saw it in the theater as a kid. And then I saw the director's cut. I'm like, dude, this is an entirely different movie with a way cooler ending.
Stay Alive is the same way. The last third of that movie is completely different structure-wise and makes a whole hell of a lot more sense in the director's cut.
Stay Alive? I don't think I've seen that one.
It really snuck under the radar, yeah. It was like... Wait, do you remember what year that came out?
I want to say it was early to mid-2000s.
We did a video game episode, like horror video games. We did that and Brain Scan. And
Brain Scan is awesome.
And that kind of goes in that like whole, like they think you're crazy if you're a horror fan, because that's basically what happens to him throughout that movie, right? It's like when you kill somebody. But Stay Alive, basically it's a demo of a video game, and if you play the video game, you end up dying. And like I just want to leave it at that. And it's a fun movie, but it's a movie that what came out in theaters and bombed was nothing like what they actually made originally. And when you kind of go through the pieces of it, you're like, I wish the studio wouldn't have fucked them on that one, because that would have been a badass
meddling
movie.
Just kills it, man.
Yeah, it's still a fun movie, but it's like incoherent at times, and I don't know.
I'm going to take a hard turn here. Knights of Badassdom is another movie that's a great example of a studio totally fucking a movie, an entire production over.
I've never seen that one either.
What's that one about? It's more of a straight up like nerd guy LARPing crazy adventure type thing comedy. And the direction it wanted to go was like, we understand our audience and let us do this. And the studio's like, we don't understand any of this. We know that we have spreadsheets that say this is what makes money. Cut all that shit out. We're not going to shoot it. And it was so neutered. It's either way, it's not a great film, but it's just it's one that I always come back to of studio involvement that was way overreaching because they didn't understand. And that's another thing that brings us back to horror. You get a writer-director that's like, give me peanuts and see what I can do. And then they look at it after it's released and they're like, dude, we gave this guy like $2 million and his shit made 14. Give him $3 million in a sequel. the shit prints money. It's not big, it's not blockbuster, but it's a safe investment.
It is.
It's like James Wan. He can turn, fucking dirt into $1 billion when he makes a
That
movie.
man can polish a turd. He really can. It's amazing.
I'll tell you this, guys, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate, but the James Wan movies that I've seen, I was not impressed with. And I don't know if I need to see them again, but I don't see it. But again,
I like the Insidious and Conjuring movies. I think they're fun horror movies, and they have like the good kind of jump scares for the most part. Where it's not like the cat; it's just like honestly, say fuck the jump scares. Just James Wan's really good at hiding shit in the background. Him and Mike Flanagan both will just freak you the fuck out. Like where the hell did that come from? I don't even know if we'll get very many other James Wan horror movies because he makes so many blockbusters now. But his next movie that should have been out by now, Malignant, is basically a Giallo slasher flick that he just made. It's just, I think it's in production hell right now because of COVID. But, he just made like all these Fast and the Furious movies and Aquaman and shit. And he went back and made a horror movie. But I feel like
Aquaman was terrible. You guys got to admit that, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Aquaman.
I still haven't seen it, but
don't see it. There's no reason. It's really
that's
bad.
the thing. Like, why does this guy get a movie? He talks to fish.
They've modified him in the comics and the movies.
Yeah.
Like he's more powerful than now. And I will say Jason Momoa, I feel like was fantastic in it. It's just not a great movie.
It's really bad. It's like trauma level.
Yeah.
Like cheese. It's
without the charm.
Without the charm. There's no charm in the movie. And Momoa should have the charm because he's a very charming guy. But actually he does, but it's just I don't know. It's weird.
Even
James Wan, go ahead.
My response and the ignorance inherent in that is what I'm trying to explain, though, is because I'm not a comic fan. I don't know all this stuff, so I don't have anything there for me. So how do you get a massive audience everything they want with taking that character and giving him a $200 million movie?
I think they just stuck Jason Momoa in it, and that was supposed to be the attraction. And they would say, from the guy that made the last Fast and the Furious movie, and that's all it took. I mean, don't forget
this all sounds bad.
Don't forget that movie is one of the
ridiculous.
reasons why James Wan is in that like few directors who have made multiple movies that made over $1 billion, right? Like it's because of that.
Yeah.
James Wan, though, I think he's a really good horror director. Like I always like how you'll see him say this in an interview. People accredit him with creating torture porn because of Saw, but the actual original Saw movie isn't that gory and doesn't have that much blood in it. And it's just the fact that the way the movie is made, it fucks you up in your head so bad that you think it was just horrific. Now, they took a turn after that and they started doing the whole torture porn thing. And that's around the time Eli Roth was doing his thing, and the Hostel movies were coming out. But James Wan accidentally created a subgenre that he really didn't participate in, which is kind of funny in its own right. And that should just say something about his craft, I feel like.
Yeah. It's okay. It's funny. I think now that talking to you guys, so I think it goes back to Saw for me because that movie was huge.
Yeah.
I took an issue with it. I wanted to love it, but something was just really ridiculous. And I'm going to do 2 spoilers here. First spoiler is, and I want to ask you guys, like, how does this guy lay there the entire time and not move? It was like when I watched The Sixth Sense, and I'm like, how did Bruce Willis get into the kid's house to wait for him? He's like sitting in a room with his mom. They're not talking. He would have had to knock on the door and be let in. He doesn't know he's dead.
Right.
Yep.
Those are like
that's a very good question on that one.
Yeah.
I think in Saw, though, I think they specifically say he took one of those drugs to slow his heartbeat down to where he was basically
okay.
Yes.
I believe that is
sense.
said in there. Yeah. I think he has the bottle in his hand and everything. No, I think he like drugged himself to basically be dead. And that was like a surprise mind fuck when he got up off the ground, right?
Yeah.
And Saw, I mean, it did a lot for the horror genre, for better or worse, because I'm not a torture porn fan at all, but past that, I mean, I think the Insidious movies and the Conjuring movies are good ghost flicks. Like, and I don't even remember, are some of those PG-13
At least the first
they
ones.
all are, Josh?
Saw?
I'd have to look.
There's like 8, right?
No, not Saw. No, I was thinking like Insidious. I feel like it could be PG-13.
And The Conjuring.
But
I think they are. I could be wrong.
But those are there's good and bad example of things. Those
Patrick
were
Wilson's
PG-13
great,
movies
though.
that worked out. Yeah, he's great.
Anything
Those
he's
movies
in.
will still scare the fuck out of you. Like Insidious, when you start hearing that "In the Garden" song start playing and the little boys playing in the house dancing,
You're terrified of Tiny Tim.
it's just like that scene freaked me out when the movie happened, especially since I saw it in theaters. And like 30 seconds before that happens, when she's taking the trash out, you can see the boy hide in a dark corner, just standing there watching her take the trash out. And it doesn't focus on it. It doesn't zoom in. You just got to catch it. And I happened to catch it. I felt very uncomfortable. And then you hear that song break out, right? And the kid's in there. And I'm like, okay, this movie's fucky. All right. and I feel like he does a good job at doing that. And I feel like he was one of the directors that made horror a little more mainstream in a good way. Like some people tried to do it in the past and failed. And I feel like that kind of worked out a bit. And now you have Mike Flanagan doing it with Netflix a lot.
I was going to say him and the Flanagan.
Thank the Lord for Mike Flanagan. He is I love him so much because we were talking about the whole PG-13 fiasco. So I had gotten out of horror for a while. 2 movies that brought me back were Oculus, and the other was It Follows. It Follows because I never watched a trailer. My buddy just said, watch it. So I had no idea what I was getting into, and I was blown away by it. But Oculus was just so fucking good.
Yeah. I couldn't look at a mirror the same way after seeing Oculus for a few days.
No,
and there was a time frame. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that fucked with me as far as mirrors go. It took me all the way back to Poltergeist 3. No, Poltergeist 3, man, that shit. I saw enough of that when I was little that mirrors literally scared me, and I hadn't felt that way until I saw Oculus, and I was fucking blown away.
And honestly, when I saw Oculus,
apple scene,
yeah. When I saw Oculus, I always felt bad saying this, but I was like, this is the best horror movie in the past 10 years, probably. I mean, it really was.
No. Don't feel bad. It was. It really was. I'm telling you, dude, I took a break, man. I was just so done with it. And then I saw this breath of fresh air called Oculus.
Right.
And I was like, somebody knows what they're doing, man. And somebody believed in this guy enough to let him do it the way he wanted to do it. It was so interesting. Yep. And it was so well done and so well shot. And then I look at who this guy is, and I see that he went to Towson University, and I'm from Towson, Maryland. I'm like, awesome. And then and then I see when I watched Hush.
I love Hush.
That came on. Hush was amazing.
Yep.
Gerald's Game, Dr. Sleep. He did King right.
Yep.
You know, Gerald's Game.
Gerald's Game, but yeah.
Yeah, Gerald's Game. I never read it, but I know how hard it is to translate Stephen King. Even in Dr. Sleep, I mean, he's got Dark Tower references in there. And I'm like, this guy just, and not only Stephen King, I mean, he brings in Kubrick's Shining perfectly.
Yes.
Like it is the perfect sequel to The Shining. I mean, you could watch those back to back and nothing is different. It's just, it's a grand
recreated as well as it could. Even using CG, he had to use CGI on part of it, or I'm trying to remember actually. The blood in the elevator, did he end up CGIing it, Josh? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I haven't dug into that.
He was just saying like it was impossible to get it to slosh the right way, right? Because that was just like a once in a lifetime thing, and he wanted it to be accurate. I remember he was trying to do it with CGI, and I feel like he might have done that, and he just had to make sure it was done right. He's really detail oriented, and I think I saw Stephen King in an interview one time basically say, I always said no one could ever make a movie out of Gerald's Game because it's just a chick in a room by herself, right? And he's like, and then Flanagan did it, and I'm like, you can make any one of my books into a movie you want. Like, go ahead. You can do this.
He deserves it.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not even a big fan of psychological horror. And the way that man handles atmosphere and psychological horror is that's it, man. This is like... This is treading on thin ice, but you know, it's Hitchcock-esque as far as setting all that shit right at the edge of your mind, and then never showing it to you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
he did his homework,
and I didn't understand that until seeing his films. Now,
what about a Ouija 2? Do you guys like the first Ouija? Because I never saw it, but then when I saw Flanagan did a Ouija 2, I was like, okay, I'm in, and it was just so good. Like I'm like
on our Flanagan episode, we covered Ouija 2 because we did all of his movies, and I hadn't seen the first one, and I enjoyed the second one, and I was like, Josh, should I go back and watch the first one? He's like, no, not if you like this one.
Yeah, the second it is good, but you can see. To me, you can see where some things were rushed and where hands were tied in some areas where there was a certain amount of a box that had to be put in. But, sequels.
Yes. Okay. So speaking of sequels, you guys have done many episodes where you break down franchises, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna rattle off some franchises for you, and you tell me your favorites, okay?
All right.
Friday the 13th.
The original.
What's the one where he takes the chick and hits her with the liquid nitrogen and busts her into pieces?
Isn't that like Jason X or something?
I thought
yeah,
so.
It's far into it.
Yeah, it's a terrible
We're
movie,
not
but
huge
just because
Friday the 13th fans.
Okay.
yeah, we have to get my wife for that.
Yeah, his wife's a huge Friday the 13th fan. He's Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm Halloween. But
I'm getting there.
yeah, okay.
I'll tell you mine. Because you talk about sequels, and the two most guilty parties are Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, actually, the sequels are really good. 1 through 7. Like 1, of course, great. 2 is great. 3 is they went a little with the cheese and they went into the 3D realm. So if you're not watching 3D, like you can see where they're using the 3D.
The pitchfork coming at the camera randomly, right?
But it's iconic because that's where he gets his mask. But 4 is the crowning achievement in the series, and it's got young Corey Feldman. 4 is the best.
We're gonna try to time it around to Friday the 13th to cover that whole franchise.
I think there's one in November.
Is there? Well,
yes, I think in November.
Not happening this year.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen this year. It's got bumped because of things. Like I think it was last year. It's like, well, it's Halloween time. We got to do the Halloween franchise, right? And stuff like that. It keeps getting bumped, and I can't wait to go back and watch them. I always really liked the first one. I thought it was a good solid slasher pick. But if I want to pull if I ignored that one and just went with the Jason ones, I would say the Corey Feldman one would probably be my favorite Jason Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah,
Yes.
and in all honesty, I've never actually sat down and watched all of them, and the wife puts in Jason X like twice a year. So that's part of my
There's
problem.
a lot of love for that movie. I can't bring myself to watch it. It's just I turned it on and I was like, this just looks really bad. Like I can't bring myself to watch it. And I used to love Jason Takes Manhattan, which is part 8, like when I was younger, when it came out. And I can't watch it. Like it's bad. And I thought I liked the Final Friday, and I watched it again because I loved it as a kid, and it's kind of bad.
Manhattan's one of them that I always feel like I like until I go back and watch it. And I got to see it at the drive-in. Like that's the one I got to see at the drive-in as a kid. And it's the one that always came on HBO when we were younger, you know? So I'm like, yeah, I watched that one a bunch. It must have been good. No, it was just the one that was on all the time.
Yes.
That's what it was.
It's really bad.
But it is fun to watch Jason do some of his kills. He got some fun ones, like beating the sleeping bag into the tree, or the sleeping bag over the fire. Yeah. Like he got some good ones in there.
He did, and punching that guy's head off was awesome. But it was like the most cheesy New York. It was like a total backlot set. It was like really. Yeah. They cut a lot of corners with that movie. They shouldn't, if they had the real money to put into it, they should have put it into it rather than make it what it was. But let's move on to Halloween.
The original.
Both of you?
He's thinking. I could tell.
Probably the original for me, but I love the idea that was toyed with of what the original idea was when you get to Season of the Witch. Now it has nothing to do. Yeah. And I can take both of them equally. Now, of course, only one of them births a horror icon. So let's get that straight. But as far as a franchise goes, I like the idea of doing it as a Halloween-based anthology, which we didn't get, but we got Trick or Treat, and that's an R, not an or. So thank God.
and I hear unique, people talk about that one, but I never saw it. Is it worth to watch?
Trick or Treat?
You've never...
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Oh, you got to watch it. For our, we got a special Halloween episode coming out that may or may not involve that movie. So it's a good flick, man. That
I know Corey Taylor from
Halloween
Slipknot really loves it.
It's just a fantastic movie, and I think it's starting to get like a huge cult following. But
yes.
This is one of the weird things with sequels and franchises. I'm a huge Halloween fan, and Michael Myers is my favorite slasher 99% of the time, if you ask me. But it's because of that original movie. Even when we covered the franchise, like we had to break it down. We didn't even do them in chronological order because we had to do it by timeline, because there's multiple timelines with the franchise, which nobody that's a normal viewer is going to fucking understand that. When Halloween 2018 came out, which I thought was bad fucking ass,
so
I can't wait till the next two.
Yes.
You know, that made another timeline, but nobody understood that going in to see that movie. It's like, well, this is a sequel to only part one. This acts like only one happened, you know? Mm-hmm. And you had H2O, which act like only 1 and 2 happened. And then you had the 1, 4, 5, 6 version, and I honestly forget Resurrection exists a lot. So I almost skipped it, not on purpose when we were.
Is that Paul Rudd
franchise? No, that's 6.
Okay.
That's the one where Busta Rhymes kung fu fights.
Okay. Yeah.
It's so bad.
Busta Rhymes' character's name is Freddy.
And we were having one of our weekly podcast meetings, and I was mapping out how we were going to do the episodes, and I ran the idea by Josh by doing it by timeline instead. And we go to do it, and I'm like, okay, so on this day we'll record these 2 and this and that, and we go through the 3 episodes, and Josh is like, yeah, but what about 8? And I'm like, don't I have them all on here? And I'm having to look, and it's because it was just a really bad fucking movie. Like, there's nothing redeemable about that one. The other ones at least did cool things. Like, I wish they would have had the balls to do the idea they had with 4 and have Jamie be the new killer going forward.
Yeah,
that would have been really cool to do too. Uh-huh. But they're like, oh, we can't get rid of Michael Myers, and the shape lives on. And as much as he's my favorite slasher, I don't think he has one of the stronger slasher franchises. I just think he's a very iconic killer with a very good original film. And these new ones, I hope the next 2, Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends.
Halloween Kills, yep.
I really hope they can keep this momentum going so that I think they will. 2018 Kills and Ends, and I'll just ignore the rest.
No. you have to look at it. The fact that it's David Gordon Green doing it. The guy is a phenomenal director. He is the guy who got John Carpenter to sign off on this.
Yeah. Get
behind him, which is not saying a lot, because I know a lot of directors are like, I'll get some money for it, dude. But it's been done to death. I think he came up with a really great idea. Laurie Strode.
Him and Danny McBride, right? Like,
yes.
What the fuck?
Yes. And look at that, dude. Like, they're frequent collaborators. Danny McBride, you know him just for comedy, but they co-wrote this great movie. And it plays to the fact that Laurie Strode is a strong character. She's in the leagues of Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor, of the strong female lead. Yeah. And I think in Halloween Kills, like, it's kind of like Terminator 2. Like, she is just always looking behind her. She became a badass. She knows that one day he's coming back no matter what anybody says. Right. And she's got to take him
the fuck out.
Yes. Oh, totally, dude. Yeah. That's why I love the new trailer so much, when she's like, let it burn. You're like, is she referring to the house, or is she referring to the shape?
Yeah. Oh, that's the shape.
Yeah. That is so cool, man. And I that's another thing I love about the Halloween, or at least the first one, is the name is The Shape, Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that, but that's how he was referred to. Not as Michael Myers, The Shape. It's just this faceless stalking figure. And we talk about these great horror movies. Halloween is just one of those perfect movies. And, I'm so thankful that John Carpenter is a talented musician because his score for that movie is just, it's so memorable, and you hear it every Halloween now. You know, if you're walking by a house trick-or-treating, or you go to like, you know, the Halloween store, there it is right there. And it's iconic.
Hey, check this out. I've been Michael Myers for Halloween every year since I was 15, and I'm almost 40. And my kids,
Really?
Yeah, my kids had to like get used to that. Like I have I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and I put the mask on the other day just to see how the 1-year-old react. She smiled at me, and I'm like, "Yeah, I got you in on this too." And
nice. Have you updated the mask though for Halloween Kills or for Halloween 2018?
No, I still have the original. I've debated getting the old. You know, I call it like I'm getting the gray beard now and stuff, and I'm like, maybe I need the old guy mask. I was thinking about getting it this year, but I might not actually. There's multiple Halloween events that I usually have to do. So like sometimes there'll be something else with my kids and the Michael Myers here. And I work at a school and they don't really like me showing up as the shape, right? Like I've done it before and they're like, can you not do that anymore? So, you know, I'll have to get multiple costumes, but there's actually, I don't even know if we're going to bring this up on the podcast, but there's another slasher movie that I love that I think came out of nowhere. And I'm thinking about doing that for Halloween this year. And that's Leslie Vernon, right? Like Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
I haven't.
Oh,
I've heard
my God,
about it,
you got to watch it.
good?
I'm thinking about being him for Halloween this year for one of the dress ups that I have to do. Yeah, it really takes the slasher genre and kind of turns it on its head. Because, like, just real brief without spoiling the movie for you.
Is that Michael Rooker?
No. Like, there's nobody famous in this movie.
Okay.
So basically, it's following a guy, and there's a college film crew that's wanting to make a movie about slashers, and it's like slashers are real people. So like, it's got lots of Easter eggs at the beginning. It's like Michael Myers, Fred Krueger, Chucky, you know, Jason Voorhees. They were all actual serial killers, right? And this guy has approached them because he's about to be the next big slasher, and he's setting up to do his thing. So it's done documentary style, and they're following him as he's setting up. Like, well, this is how this happens in a slasher. This is how this happens, and he's showing them how he's going to kill all these kids, right? And it looks like a mockumentary. And then anytime he's got his slasher suit on, and he kills, it'll go into HD again, right? Like, and turn into a horror movie. And it's scary, and then it's funny again when it's behind the scenes. And then by the end of the movie, like I would say the last third, it's a full-on fucking slasher movie with the jokes taken out mostly. But it's a good slasher movie if you like them.
All right,
it's gotta be
I'm
streaming
definitely
on
going to check
something.
it out.
It's I wouldn't say in intensity, but it's like Cabin in the Woods kind of fun, and You Might Be the Killer kind of fun, like in that arena.
Nice. All right, I'm definitely going to check it out then. I'm always interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, the meta self-aware horror movies are really fun usually.
Yeah,
Totally. That's why Creep is so good. And I don't know if I would consider it a horror movie, but
Oh, I would. He's a creepy ass slasher motherfucker in a way, right?
it is so good, dude. And Creep 2 is good too.
Yeah.
But it's like that, you know, it's very kind of aware of what it is. But like you're the whole time you're like, dude, is this guy for real or what? Like, what is going on? Oh man,
And
the
the real
Duplass
question
brothers are
is
great, man.
I know. And you know his junk's going to make an appearance in the movie to frighten you.
Right.
I'm still not convinced the Creep's not his nickname for his dick, so.
there you go.
Peach Fuzz.
That reminds me of what was Paul Rudd's name in Anchorman? It's like Dr. Kenneth Noisewater or something for his.
I don't remember. Yeah.
All right, so let me ask you guys this: we're gonna do top lists right now.
Okay. Oh, we're
right.
terrible at these.
It's okay. I'm gonna force it out of you because I know how hard it is, and we're gonna have to make some hard decisions right now. Okay, so let's go, Jessie. What's your number one?
Oh God. It's gonna have to be Halloween or Scream. Like those are the ones I watch the most. Like I just go back and watch them over and over again. I'm gonna say Halloween. I'm gonna take the coward's way out and go with that one.
All right.
I got my Haddonfield Slashers hat on right now. So
nice. Oh man, I'm there with you all the way. It's just so great. Jessie, what do you got?
You and Josh.
Josh, yeah, sorry.
That's whatever. I'll talk to whoever seems like they're talking to me. this is always hard for me because even being the Nightmare on Elm Street guy, I get stuck between Poltergeist and Scream. But the one I come back to more is Scream.
You guys, that's funny. You guys both said Scream in there, or waffled at least between it.
You have no idea how impactful that movie was on both of us.
Yeah, I mean, we
broke
both got into
VHS
horror
tapes with that
early
movie.
on. We killed tapes. I know at one point in time we were keeping track of how many times we'd watched it and like competing. And I remember being in the 70s at some point, and I'm talking about in the movie's like first year and a half of existence. I bought that movie. You remember when like Blockbuster would get a movie way before it went on sale, and if you wanted to buy a copy from it, it was like $60 or something, which was a lot back then.
Yep.
I bought that. I reserved the poster. Like that movie was huge for me because I was a slasher guy, and slasher movies fucking died, and they just didn't exist anymore. And you would get these really shitty ones, and then I see the previews for Scream, and I'm like, that looks amazing. And you see Drew Barrymore, and I'm like, she's gonna be the final girl. And you see Wes Craven's name, and I went and saw it. I saw it multiple times in theaters, and I think it's a very good and powerful movie. And when it came out, we had to have been like what, 15 or 16, Josh?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like a good turning point, like in horror and for slashers, and it was just
It brought the genre
right time of our life.
back. And it laid out the rules for everybody that didn't know them.
Exactly. And that's actually the special effects videotape that we were talking about, like where we were just practicing gutting each other and making things. That was like a year
We're in
after
Ghostface.
Scream came out. Yeah. I think I had a Ghostface on. Yeah. Like it was like that movie was very impactful for us. And that's why when people ask me what's your favorite slasher or favorite horror, every time I get stuck and I say Halloween or Scream for both categories, because I think they're just both very good movies, but I don't know. It's got to be Halloween for me. That was my first one, so. Scream's badass too, though. It's a good point, like tie right there.
Okay, so we'll say, so Jessie, you got Halloween all the way, but
yeah,
it's very tough. Scream is in there, and then Josh, you're going with Scream, but Poltergeist is a very close second, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Poltergeist is so good, though.
It is. It really is.
I wanted to bring that up. We were talking about PG-13 movies. Most of the horror PG-13 movies aimed at adults were bad. But if it was a PG-13 horror movie aimed at kids, those are usually pretty good.
What was Ring?
Like Poltergeist was PG-13, right? Do I?
Yeah.
Was Ring PG-13?
It was.
I think so, but that was aimed at adults, though.
I didn't watch it when it came out.
Movies.
I watched it late in life, and I was like, wow, this is really good. It was actually really good.
But keep in mind that Poltergeist was pre-ratings.
Yes.
As far as there being a PG-13 slot.
Wait,
they made it for that movie.
No. Are you sure they made it for that? I thought they made the rating for Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom was the one that pushed it over the edge.
Okay.
So it was for Spielberg, though. Like Spielberg basically.
Yeah, it was all Spielberg's fault.
To make
It's all Spielberg's
a
fault.
rating because he had 2 movies coming out that he did not want to be rated R. Right.
Yeah. So we can thank Steven Spielberg for another thing. I mean, the guy's he's just the best. Dude. And again, another rabbit hole with Spielberg, just because he creates some of the best movies ever and dips his foot in multiple genres.
Yeah.
He's great. Yeah.
Have you watched Monster Squad with your kids? That's a good classic.
Yes. We just watched it a couple months ago because that was you guys grew up in the same era I did. Monster Squad as a kid was my jam, dude. It was just so good. And as a teenager, I had to get it from the video store again and watch it with my friends. We just loved it. We knew all the lines and everything.
Right.
That's like Scream, the appreciation that Scream had for horror. Monster Squad had that same appreciation of horror, and they knew exactly what to do to get it done.
Monster Squad and Fright Night were always really cool to me as a kid because those were the horror movies that had horror fans in them as the main characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
in
like,
most
hey,
movies,
look, it's
people
me
are
representing
oblivious.
a movie. Yeah.
That's what's. I guess that's the charm of them is, especially if you are a horror fan. I mean, look at especially in Monster Squad, like they form a squad about the classic Universal monsters and horror movies in general. They're Stephen King fans, and they know they got it. They're a bunch of kids, but they got to kick into action and stop Dracula and Wolfman and the creature with
He's
the
got
black
nards for the record.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, they're the horror Goonies, man.
They are.
Yeah, it really
They're
is.
so good.
I really wanted that Stephen King Rules T-shirt that
Yes,
dude
me
has
too.
at the beginning. But the internet wasn't a thing. You couldn't order them back then. You know, like I should get one now.
You can
as an
still get
adult.
one now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you can't, you could just like cafe press it or something.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
It wasn't like it was like a very clever design. It was just like
Oh, it looked
text on a
ironed
shirt.
on in that one. It's like
Yeah. It probably was. You know what? What's funny about Monster Squad is John, I don't know how you say Grise or Grease, from Napoleon Dynamite. Uncle Rico is the Wolfman, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the better Draculas in a movie, which is kind of sad
totally.
to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a really good one. I mean, based, of course, on Universal's properties, but so good. I mean, and just his whole approach to it, awesome. Scary German guy, awesome.
And Rudy was a badass, right?
Rudy was he was the guy you wanted to be. He skids up on his bike, picks up his shoe, strikes a match on it, and lights a cigarette. Like he was the coolest dude.
Even though he was probably a big fucking nerd because he was a greaser in the 80s, like that wasn't
He's
even
total
a thing. But like he
greaser,
looked
yeah.
cool to us.
Yeah, and he fucked with Kevin Arnold's brother. Was Jason Harvey. He was in The Wonder Years. That kid.
Oh
Was in the movie.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes him eat the Snickers bar.
Yeah. It's Horace. That was a crucial line right there.
Man, how
So
did I derail us so strong?
Huh?
I said, how did I derail us so strongly?
That's how it goes, man. Okay, so I know I put you guys on the spot. And I think for the next question, we're gonna break it down into categories. For me, it's really hard for me to say my favorite movie in general. Like I always had to break it into genres and stuff. One day I forced myself to do it, and I finally said Forrest Gump was my favorite movie ever. Now I'm more confident saying in certain genres, because I already broke them down. Now that I can say my favorite movie of all time, in comedy it was really hard because Dumb and Dumber is like the greatest. But then Big Lebowski came along, so I'm like,
Oh, so good.
yeah. But horror, it was instant. I didn't have to think about it. It's Dawn of the Dead, because I remember the impact that it had on me when I saw it. I was at a friend's house. I was in high school. We just got high. I'm watching this movie and he falls asleep, and I'm just like, I'm glued into this movie. Just love it so much. And then he's like, he kind of wakes up. He's like, "Hey, dude, I'm falling asleep. You mind going?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can I borrow this?" And he's like, "Yeah, take it home." So I went home and watched it, and I was just like, "Oh, dude, this is the best." I mean, I thought about it it's like the only other movie that I thought about it for so long after Dawn of the Dead, because Dawn of the Dead I really seriously broke down. I thought about it, the implications of society and everything. The only movie that I thought about it for days after that was It Follows, because it was like, this thing will never leave you,
Right.
Yeah. You could run as far as you want, but it will always catch up to you. And I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead is my all-time favorite, and I love Romero. Actually got a chance to meet him. I met Tom Savini too at a horror convention, and Greg Nicotero.
Nice.
Greg Nicotero
Holy
actually told me to watch Shaun of the Dead because it wasn't out in the States yet. Even though he's
That's
like,
awesome.
You're a big fan. He's like, dude, you got to watch Shaun of the Dead. And they were actually playing it there. Like somebody had a burned copy of it. So I walked by and I saw a little bit of it. I'm like, dude, I got to totally watch this. But I thought that was really cool that Greg Nicotero was like, "Hey, you gotta watch this movie, man." And he was like the nicest guy. Tom Savini, if you guys never met him, totally the coolest dude ever. Doesn't charge for autographs, and it just is down the talk about
nice.
horror. Like the coolest dude ever. And I'm like standing in awe of this guy because his whole effect on everything. And then to have a really down to earth guy who's just willing to shoot the shit with you. It was the best. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Does Dawn of the Dead make you guys, like, if you're in a shopping mall, walk around? Like, anytime you're in there, do you, like, look at the stores and be like, okay, so I'd hit that up, and then I'd go over there and get that. I'd barricade there. I do that every time. I have, like, a Home Alone, like, booby trap drawing, like, planned out in my head, but in the mall, and that happens every time I walk into a fucking mall because of that.
Oh, that's great.
But you know what? It's in Dawn of the Dead's era, you got to say that Monroeville Mall was pretty well stocked with things that you would need to survive.
Yeah.
I look at the malls now, though, and I'm like, can I survive in this mall?
Everyone's fucked after maybe 36 hours.
Yeah, right.
I can't remember. Is that the same mall from Night of the Comet?
I don't know.
I don't know. Some of the malls got reused, where like Chopping Mall and all that. Yeah.
Chopping Mall.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the mall and shopping mall is the same mall in Night of the Comet. That I'm sure of.
Okay. I feel like it's the same one from Dawn of the Dead, but I'm not sure, though.
It may be.
That would be awesome. I mean, I drove by there because I went to Evansville Cemetery. Actually, like, I moved here from, I live in Michigan. I'm from Maryland, but even driving to Michigan, you see exit signs to Monroeville, and I've always wanted to stop by there. And I didn't make it the one day that I did go to Evans Cemetery where Night of the Living Dead was filmed, and that still looks the same. It looks great. But I always wanted to go there. But the big bummer is that it's like totally redone, so it doesn't look anything like it did. So it's probably not the best place to go. But I've
like
been
trying to go to the Evil Dead
stairs.
cabin.
Yeah, right. Wait, did they? If I'm correct, they didn't even though Sam Raimi says it was done in Michigan. He's a Michigan-born guy from here. But they shoot it in Ohio though?
No, it's Tennessee.
Huh? Tennessee.
Oh, it's in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then the second one was just a set, right? Yeah, the second one was a set. They built the cabin so they could do all the crazy stuff.
Since the first two are so intertwined with reuse, I mix up the behind the scenes in my head.
Those are good behind the scenes too, especially the camera work was amazing. The stuff that they came up with.
Guys, put this shit on a 2x4. Go.
We'll throw in
the
some
Ramo
Three Stooges. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Get on a bike and just ride. All right. So let's do categories. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I know you're a big vampire fan. So, best vampire movie.
Fright Night. Fright Night was my favorite.
Fright Night. Okay.
Yeah.
Lost
I
Boys.
won't say it's the best.
Yes!
It's the most fun one. Oh, fuck yeah. I always forget to say Lost Boys.
Never forget Lost
sometimes.
Boys. It's one of the
No.
best.
I never forget Lost Boys. I just always say Fright Night first because how young I was when I saw it.
How about this? Top 5 per category. So, how about Jessie?
We'll do top 3. We'll do top 3.
Okay,
just
top 3.
Top forever.
Okay, yes, top 3.
Fright Night, Lost Boys, and this last one's gonna be kind of hard. Definitely not The Shed because that movie fucking sucked. I watched that recently and it angered me.
Twilight, right?
No.
Oh, dear God.
I might have to go. I feel like there's an 80s one I'm missing, but I might have to go with John Carpenter's Vampires. I just really like that one.
It is. It's so good. I'm so glad I watched it again. All right, what about you, Josh?
My other two to fill it out would probably be From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really unsure on my third, but right now it would probably be Fright Night, if not Near Dark. But I've only seen Near Dark like twice in my entire life.
Yes. I'm glad you put that in there. Yes.
It's a great movie. I just can't rewatch that one as much. And part of my value of favorite movies is which one can I watch every weekend?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so you just made me question myself because my number 1 is From Dusk Till Dawn, by far, hands down.
Okay.
The best of both worlds. Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino came together and just made the coolest, batshit crazy movie ever, which is basically 2 movies. And so if you know nothing about it and you go into the movie, you're like, this is a pretty interesting movie. And then vampires show up and you're just like, what the fuck? And and K&B comes at it hard and just it's a gore masterpiece. Number 2, and I'm glad you said Lost Boys because Lost Boys is in there all the way. Lost Boys, it still holds up so well, and a lot of stuff from the 80s is kind of shaky, but that's one that holds up. Third is tough though. Watching vampires again, that's pretty good. Near Dark, you made me question it because I was gonna say Near Dark because I really love that movie. I mean, you got Lance Henriksen, you got.
You got half the Aliens crew, right?
Yeah, half the Aliens crew. Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah. So I like the fact that it was a totally different take on vampires. You know, you talk about the Western vampires and vampires. They're kind of like the same one. They're like the gypsy roaming vampires.
Yep.
You know, and they have an RV, which was a cool aspect to it.
And it's their story. It's not other people encountering them.
Yes.
Yeah. It's true too. And it's very. I like Vampire the Masquerade, the role playing game growing up. Yeah. That's very. That movie tied into the Vampire the Masquerade role playing game very much too. Like that was you could tell that was a big well, you could just tell it was a huge influence of how the vampires operated in a modern time. You know, and it's just
I can see that
it was a strong film. Yeah.
Yeah. So would that be my number 3? Because Blade, I don't consider it a horror movie, but it's got vampires. And it's pretty rad.
Yeah, it's pretty. We
covered the trilogy as a horror. Yeah.
I'll go with Blade. Blade is you can watch movie. That. Yeah. You can watch it all the time. It's that good. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. How about you guys pick the next category? How about Jesse? You pick next category.
All right. How about haunted house movies?
Okay.
Dick.
All right.
That's a kind of broad though. Like, do we want to narrow it down to like Ghost or what? just your favorite haunted
that's
house
fine.
movie.
You know why I'm saying that.
All right. Should I start?
Yeah, you go ahead, Rick.
Go for it.
Well, I guess Poltergeist is number 1. I can't contend with
exactly.
that. Yeah. You know, I saw Sinister for the first time the other day. It's not a great movie, but it was an interesting haunted house piece, even though that kind of is not what it is.
Just covered that one too.
Yeah. That movie just passed me by, but I saw Ethan Hawke was in it, so I watched it and I was pleasantly surprised. I can't think of any other ones, man. I know I've seen so many. How about you guys go? How about Josh? You go first.
Well, my number 1's obviously Poltergeist. Been there. I get hell for this, but House.
I was thinking of House. I always liked House too when I was younger, but I probably wouldn't like it as an adult.
Yeah,
we watched it recently for the podcast, and we're like, "Holy shit, this is a comedy movie!" Had no clue watching it as a kid. It was so creepy.
Yeah.
Well, that's strictly just talking about the first one. We have not had the balls to go back and watch the sequel yet.
Oh, the second one is totally different tone. It's total goofy. Yeah.
I don't know if I have a third without just digging into the fucking podcast well.
You're allowed to do that because we pick our favorite movies for the category and subgenre for the podcast.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Really, I'm going to pick shit and say that I love this, and then people are going to be like, well, then why the fuck didn't you cover it on that episode? Because my memory is not so good. Marijuana causes memory loss. Message. Anyways, I got 2, so yeah, go to you, Jesse.
Yes, Jesse.
You only got 2. I'm going to put Poltergeist in there.
He's gonna name like 5.
I'm gonna go with Paranormal Activity. Even though it's technically like a demon movie, but that movie fucked me up.
Yeah.
So
I
was a projectionist. I was a projectionist finishing college when that movie came out, and this is when movies were actually film, and I had to put them together and screen them. And I watched that movie in a 16-house theater by myself in a 300-seat theater room, and fucked me up. I had to go back up in the projection booth and like unthread the movie and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, why did I do this to myself? But that's definitely I might even put that over Poltergeist. I don't know, just because it freaks me the fuck out. And,
you know what's funny is I didn't see it when it came out, and I resisted seeing it because it was in that PG-13 time. I wrote off like everything that came out. I was burned by Blair Witch, how they made the sequel so bad, and I was like, oh, it's like everybody's ripping off Blair Witch now. I watched it years later, and I'm like, dude, it was cool, man. It was intense. It's definitely a mind fuck, and I think that definitely deserves its spot in the top 3 all the way. Very cool.
And can I count The Shining? It's a haunted hotel.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's do it. Because
if you said no, I would have said Insidious. I think I would have gone with Insidious. I think it's the backup.
Well, think about this, because it's not billed as a haunted house type of movie. Mm-hmm. But if you watch Dr. Sleep, you learn, even if you didn't pick it up in The Shining, that, that's what this place is. It's just a trap for all these tortured souls, Yep. So yeah, that works perfectly. Okay. So what, Jesse, you picked this one, right? Is it Josh, your turn?
All right. I'm bad at being on the spot with shit. Let's go easy. Let's go fucking horror comedy.
Okay.
Ooh. You want me to go first? You want to go, Rick?
Yes. Go, Jesse.
Cabin in the Woods, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and Leslie Vernon. Behind the Mask, Rise of Leslie Vernon. I would have to say probably those 3.
All right. I got to watch that one. Awesome. So you put it in your 3. So that's high up there. I definitely have to watch it then. All right. I guess I'll go. Evil Dead 2, because I don't really consider Army of Darkness horror. It's more just straight comedy. Mm-hmm. But Evil Dead 2 has a horror element to it. Maybe, Cabin in the Woods would definitely be in there. And then, that's tough. I never thought about the horror comedy genre when I broke it down, or category. I'll hold off on my number 3 for right now. Let me see what you guys got.
All right. Of course, Cabin in the Woods. There's just no getting away from that. Club Dread, fucking Broken Lizard slasher movie. You can't leave
love
out.
that one.
Okay.
Have you seen that?
A long time ago when it came out. Again, I didn't really feel it at the time. Maybe I need to give it a revisit. Okay.
I saw that one in theaters and I didn't feel it. And he picked that as one of his horror comedies. And we did like a few episodes on horror comedy movies. And when I went back and watched them, I'm like, okay, this is fucking great.
Okay.
And I'm drawing a blank on a third at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard, dude. Yeah.
There's so many marbles rattling around in there.
I know.
How about werewolf movies?
Oh, okay. I got a good one. So American Werewolf in London, of course, is one of the tops. I don't know if that would be my number 1, because there are not that many good werewolf movies.
No.
We've approached this before. We had a problem here before.
I think that would have to be number 1. Oh, wait. You know what was cool was the one that MTV did with Julie Delpy. Was it American Werewolf in London? I remember that being cool, but I haven't watched it in
Paris,
years.
American Werewolf in Paris?
Yeah. Was that
good? Don't go back to it, man.
Okay.
Just remember it beautifully and just don't go back.
Okay. Ignorance is bliss, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I made that mistake on our show.
He picked that one. I was like, really?
I'm glad
like,
you
you
told
haven't
me
watched
because
this
I
in a
might have.
while.
Yeah, I might have watched it again and been like, "What am I doing, man?"
Oh, Mountain Dew.
I'm at a loss. I have no idea because werewolf movies are not a big genre. I still haven't seen Dog Soldiers.
It's good.
Oh,
So it's
so
Late Phases.
good.
That's another good recent one. Is Late Phases.
Okay. All right. So what are your picks?
Mine, Silver Bullet's always my favorite werewolf movie.
Oh, Gary
Yeah, that's a
Busey
Stephen
and
King,
Corey
right?
Haim.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
American Werewolf in London is easily my second. Third is where I start to like drift because I can't remember if I haven't seen Howling in so long. I don't want to say Howling without going back and rewatching it.
Yeah. Or Benicio del Toro's Wolfman.
Oh, I wasn't a huge fan of that one. I was excited. I was like,
like,
oh,
do
they're
we even
rebooting
have
the
to go
Silver
there?
movies.
What about there's
No.
Wolf Cop?
There is a
Have you
Wolf
seen
Cop.
that?
We're not. No, I've not. Usually
Save
with
that for
things like
schlock.
names like that, I'll watch it. Yeah, I'll save that for
Yeah.
schlock. I don't know. Dog Soldiers. Let's just cop out and put that number 3.
Okay. I never knew that this would be so tough because
I know.
there just really
I
aren't
did it on
that
purpose.
many. You have a good
I got-
stumper there, man.
I got to go with American Werewolf in London, and then Silver Bullet, and then the one that catches so much hate. And Jesse already knows where I'm going with this. It's going to be Ginger Snaps.
I've heard good things, but I've never seen it. It's good.
A lot of people like
There-
Ginger Snaps. Jesse does not. And actually, that's the only time I've ever gotten hate mail on the podcast.
Is
It is a polarizing film.
It's Beverly from It in it, right? The original Beverly in the Mick Garris.
She's not. Is she the younger sister?
I think so. I think she's one of the main stars.
Huh. That I didn't know.
Because
the main person.
Oh my God,
yeah.
I'm blanking on her name. The main girl. Help me out, Jesse.
You just broke me. Isabel. What the fuck? She's on that witch show right
Catherine
now.
Isabel. Catherine Isabel.
Catherine Isabel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not her. What's the other one?
I don't know. It's her sister in the movie. That's all I got.
Okay. Yeah, I think Bev is in that movie. I could be wrong, but I think she is.
But yeah, people either love or hate that one.
Yeah,
And I actually had to come around to it.
Really?
Yeah.
And they have a lot of sequels too.
And you don't have to watch this.
All right. Good to know. Okay.
How about things that come from space? How about that?
The Thing, all the way. My number one.
Ooh.
Oh, that was quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't have to think about that. Well, I would say Predator, but Predator's not a horror movie. It's an action.
I'll accept it.
Really? See,
That's walking
It is
the
more
line.
action,
Walking
but
the line, yeah.
He's like a slasher.
It's a
kinda.
slasher film, yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
true.
It's just one of the
You
most
can look at it from that angle.
It's one of the most badass films ever made, and I'm really, I'm really surprised and thankful that when Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, shook hands in that manly fashion, that the world didn't explode right there. Like we could have all ended because of that scene. You know?
Oh God.
You know what? I guess you can put that it's a horror sci-fi. But then it bleeds into the Alien verse as well, even though Alien gets away from the more horror aspects into like action as well. So
Yeah, but everybody
that's okay.
considers the original Alien to be a horror.
it is
movie,
horror.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my number one is The Thing, followed by. Okay, I was actually going to ask you guys this earlier, and I don't consider this horror, but I'm not scared by horror movies. Just because I've been watching them so long, like no horror movies ever scare me. But there are two movies that have left an impression on me. You know, if we're talking about horror, I don't think Final Destination is a horror movie.
Oh, it is.
Like
yeah.
Is it? Okay.
I made an
was a
argument that
slasher.
is it a slash? I made an argument that it was a slasher.
It's a
movie,
knockoff
actually.
film, I guess, right? Okay. I saw that when I was in high school, left the theater, drove home, felt really weird. Like I had a really weird feeling, like I don't want to die in a car accident or something, you know, like, but another movie that's not a horror movie, which from space is Fire in the Sky. I saw that young and I was really into aliens
There
at
you
the
go.
time. and we were watching them with the front door open, and I had this really creeped out feeling like I'm like, I hope they don't come in here and take me and, you know, do weird shit to me.
You don't want to probe your butt, right? Josh always grew up in the boonies, in the kind of places where you would get abducted by aliens. So staying at his house for the weekend was always kind of fucky. And for some reason, Close Encounters of the Third Kind was always on TV.
Oh my God, yes.
Well, not only that, but out at my place, since I didn't have cable, it was X-Files and a show called Sightings.
Yeah, I remember Sightings.
Yeah.
Okay, thank God. Somebody else that actually remembers that shit existed.
I loved it. I watched it all the time, man. All the time. That's why I was so into aliens and UFOs at that time. Like I said, we all grew up in the same era. So like X-Files and Sightings were like the two big things, man. And then going to the library and like reading books on aliens and stuff like that. I was like obsessed. Yep. So I had to see Fire in the Sky, and then it just like broke me. I'm like, dude, that's fucked. I definitely don't want to meet any aliens now.
Well, and then at that time, telling my parents that we were going to go outside for a while to skywatch was a great way to smoke cigarettes.
Nice. Oh, man, that is great. And then if you see a UFO, score, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So is that two you got right there?
Yeah, I'm glad you said Close Encounters. I will put that in there. Wait. Or no, I said Predator. I think that's 3 right there. Okay.
But
I don't think no, but I don't think Close Encounters is a horror though. It's just sci-fi. There's nothing horror about it.
Okay. It's been so long since I've seen it, but you're right. I can't think of any.
Okay, watch it again, but watch the director's cut.
Okay.
It's long as fuck.
The long version?
Yeah, it's long as fuck, but it's worth it.
The long.
Yeah.
This is like the 4-hour Flanagan Dr. Sleep.
We're going to do the short version. Do you? Good, you're married.
All right, Josh, what's yours?
Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
I'm glad you put that in there. And the best song ever, too.
Yes, the Dickies all the way. Aliens or Alien. I'll take 1 or 2, honestly, if we're going here.
You can go top 3. You can use both if you really want to.
Yeah, you can.
I don't know if I'm that married to
Alien
it.
3. I don't want to say the director's cut because it's not the director's cut, but it's like the assembled version of what they think David Fincher would want. Is actually really fucking good. Joss Whedon, though, he killed it with Resurrection. It's terrible. I almost threw that disc off the balcony in my apartment when I watched it. I'm like, I never want to watch this again.
The studio killed that movie, though. Like, if you ever watch any interviews with him, watch behind the scenes. Supposedly, they didn't even use most of his shit.
Okay.
The
only redeeming factor is Ron Perlman in that movie.
I'm going to be a dick for saying this, and Jessie knows why.
Do it.
So
do it.
Night of the Creeps.
Okay. You stole my shit.
I know.
It's all right. We can have crossovers.
Night of the Creeps. Critters. Critters is probably my number 1.
Oh.
And I don't know if I want to say The Thing or Aliens. I'm going to say The Thing.
Yes. It's really hard to go between Alien and Aliens because they're just two totally different movies. Because Alien appeals to like the horror fanatic in you, that very claustrophobic nature of you don't know what, and you got nowhere to go. Like, in most movies you can probably get out of the situation unless you're in Cabin in the Woods and you're locked off. But you're in space, so you're fucked. Whereas Alien 2, it's like balls to the wall. Like they're going after them. They got Marines and they're going to take them down. But it's still like the alien is the xenomorph is the perfect killing machine. It's
like what are you going to do?
Yeah. What are you? Dude, it's insane how perfect it is as a killing machine,
Yep.
And even though the Alien versus Predator movies weren't great, it was a good mythology that, the
it's a neat idea, right? That
it was a very neat idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Great on paper.
Yeah. Very great on paper. I mean, there's parts of the movies to like, and there's like really cool ideas. Like even, the Predators with Adrian Brody, who is not an action guy at all. It was kind of weird seeing, and Topher Grace was kind of weird in it, but it had good ideas. Again, it's just like execution, I guess, on those parts.
It's really funny how in all these conversations we can very circularly go back, which we were saying at the beginning, like just how horror ties things together. Because Night of the Creeps was basically stolen and remade as Slither, which is also a really good movie.
Yes,
Nathan
and
Fillion,
James Gunn.
made
Yes.
by James Gunn, right? It's all a circle here. Which we got a bit of Joss Whedon in there for breaking out Nathan Fillion. You know, like they're all connected, man. It's all connected.
Totally.
Yes, and you
came
have
up with an interesting
Michael Rooker. Who would go on to play Yando.
Yep.
Or is it Yanda?
You had it's Yandu, I think.
Yandu, okay.
You came up with like interesting, not necessarily a genre, but you were saying movie that scared you. I always like talking about that. Like, what's a horror movie that actually scared you?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know the most coming into this. Like, what has truly terrified you guys?
I mean, at different times of my life, you know, obviously I would see a movie and it would do it, but, and it's never a whole movie. It's always specific parts of things. I would say a recent one for me was Hereditary, because I saw that while my wife and kids were out of town, and I had to come home to the house by myself for 3 days, and I kept thinking I could see her face up in the dark corners, like all the time. Like that was a recent one. Like the movie itself didn't scare me.
You talked about Gage, right? You made a mention to it. We're not gonna have any spoilers on anything, but
okay.
You know the situation in Heredity, like that. Yeah. I did not see coming. I was like, oh fuck! I can't believe that just happened.
Right, like, and that's a movie. Like I wasn't scared while watching the movie, but it scared me for a few days afterwards. I wasn't scared watching Oculus, but it scared me afterwards. Paranormal Activity is another good one that fucked me up in that movie theater that night. Paranormal Activity, I was actually scared while watching it though.
Nice, yeah.
And then when we covered that on the podcast our first year, my wife and kids were out of town visiting the in-laws again, and I watched the entire Paranormal Activity series by myself, like back to back. And at some point, I called Josh and his wife. I'm like, you guys want to come over and have a cookout with me and maybe watch some of these movies? Because I had fucked myself up at that point. And a relative came to the house 2 days earlier than he was supposed to, and I was getting up to take a shower, freaked out in the morning, and I could hear somebody stomping upstairs in the attic area above me, and it was my fucking relative had showed up early, man, and it was just like, this movie damages me. So Josh, you got any of those that just straight fuck you up and make you not sleep for a couple of days?
We've talked about this before, which I can't go call back to a specific moment in a movie that like that scared me, except for Paranormal Activity, just because of that going off into how I was raised, and it's the same for me and Jessie, and like the things we believe in on the other side and shit, and things we've witnessed in our lives growing up. That like there's you don't fuck with that. I've been close to things like that. But the one that shocked me the most, and we talked about it on the podcast, I am not a fan of home invasion movies, and they're mostly boring and stale. Yeah. And the night after watching The Strangers and The Strangers Pray at Night, I heard something in the backyard. Ooh. And I would have just laid there like it was nothing. But coming right off of watching those, I actually had to get up and get a light and go look. So
you almost became the trope.
Yeah. But even though I didn't have fun watching the movie, it still affected me. So that's got to count.
That's interesting.
And there's a laundry list of shit from when I was a kid, but I can't count anything like that. Like this is going to be weird. I saw The Butterfly Effect in theaters, and this is so weird. I felt uncomfortable and uneasy for no reason to pinpoint.
No, there's a reason, because if you think about it, the effect of these little actions that we take can have big consequences.
Yeah.
That's probably what fucked you up. Is like, you're like, I don't want to do something that I think is inconsequential, but it actually is the most consequential thing, you know. and I'm now going to create the next Hitler or something, you know, because I threw a bottle in the trash can, or, you know, like something happened from that, you know, stemming on. Yeah, I could see that with that. That makes a lot of sense.
That's about it for me on those.
Yeah,
I think the movies that scare you as an adult after you're a horror fan are more important than when you're a kid, because all sorts of shit can scare you when you're a kid.
They got to have like for me, it's like, I really like the ones that make you think. And again, I come back to It Follows. I just thought that was so clever and so well done. When you tell somebody about that movie, it sounds ridiculous. And they're like, oh, so it's like a sexual disease, like, yeah. And you're like, but it's so much more. And they look at you like you're ridiculous. But it is just the most interesting. And literally, I thought for days after that movie, I'm like, dude, like, spoilers aside, there's nothing you can do. Like, you are fucked.
See, you've brought that movie up a couple of times, and I've stayed quiet to not turn this into a debate. But I saw that movie. I like the ride. Like, I like the fun ride. I don't like to think too much. I like the fun ride. And that movie bored me to fucking tears.
Really?
I enjoyed it, but Josh
watched
didn't like
it
that
the one time.
Okay. What? You know what? I can see that because there's not a lot going on in that movie. There's not. It's like,
it's very atmospheric, right?
Yes, it totally is. And there's a lot of talking. I mean, and it's not like in horror movies we're used to like some kind of actiony event. I mean, this thing is just walking at you. It's like the most unscary thing, dude. Yeah, it's the most unscary thing. But when you think about the psychology behind it, it's actually pretty frightening. So yeah,
and
if
the
you're
fact that
watching
you'll never get away. Yeah.
Well, see, and that's the other thing is it's something that I watched before we started this podcast, and doing this podcast has made us watch movies in a completely different way and an analytical way, and start noticing so many cues and subtext in ways you haven't seen before in new movies and going back and watching older movies. So I may go back and watch it, in a different way.
Do it.
Case in point, when we did Ari Aster. And Jessie was like, fuck, Josh is going to cover Midsummer, and he's just going to shit on this movie for like...
You didn't like it the first time you saw it?
He hadn't seen it yet, but he usually doesn't like
seen
slow.
It at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like slow burns.
It's fucking long.
I loved
slow
that movie. I fucking loved it. And then I watched interviews about where it really came from. And then I had a personal connection to it. And it fucking just totally different movie. Josh than Josh that would have watched it a year ago. So I'll give what my point being in all this diarrhea of the mouth is you brought it up twice. I remember hating it, but only saw it once. I'll give it another shot since you've brought it up. And that's the whole point of the conversation we're having. So I will give it another watch.
I'll give Midsummer another good kudos. Like, I like The Good Place, and I can't remember his name who plays Chidi is in that. And like seeing him in something different, because I think in The Good Place, like I think he's one of the finest actors in the show. He's just so good at his character. And then seeing him in something totally different, and he's great in that movie too. It was awesome. Like that whole movie was just, you talk about a slow burn. That's a slow burn.
It is a constant mind fuck. Yes.
Yeah. Mind fuck to the max. What was his other movie right before that?
Hereditary.
Oh yeah, he did do Hereditary. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's
only done 2 movies.
Yeah. He's totally a guy to look out for.
We did a couple of older directors at first, and then we purposely did like all the current ones, right? Like that have been doing modern movies. So like, it was really fun to do him and Flanagan, and hell, we threw James Wan in that mix, and
recently Fede Alvarez.
Yeah.
Because okay, so what are you guys' thoughts on his Evil Dead? Because I hated it when I saw it, and
I fucking loved
things about it. Really?
I fucking love the Evil Dead remake. That's probably one of the best remakes ever made.
Really?
Yeah. Now I was on the fence walking out of the theater because I was torn between what I loved and what I expected, and I had to come around to it. And now and actually reading and watching interviews with Fede, I understand it more, and that I know that plays a part in this. But coming around to it, I fucking love it. I wouldn't have it any other way for somebody to have touched that was so important to me. And when I thought they damaged it and realized that it had to go where it went, so to speak.
And I'm glad they had the goddamn common sense to not try to pick a new Ash, right?
Yep.
They're like,
Yeah.
let's tell a story and just let's not do Ash because that's not going to work here.
Wait. And then if you stay after the credits, you got Bruce Campbell saying groovy.
Groovy. And that was so that he could put his little stamp of approval on it, that he was okay with it. But that was the smart thing they did. They didn't try to pick the new actor to be Ash. They were like, let's just make a scary fucking movie in a cabin where the Book of the Dead used to summon some fucking demons and disembowel people. Let's
put some callbacks in it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a second shot.
Yeah, you kind of got to look at it, pretend the other movies didn't happen, so you can actually appreciate it on its own and then understand how it ties in. Mm-hmm. But that's up to the watcher to decide. But the thing about it is that I had to understand was, had they given the fans what they thought they wanted with that movie, you would have got Nightmare 6. That's the best way for me to sum it up.
It would have been a shitty movie, and they went against what
Freddy?
Right.
That's why we're such
against
assholes.
what fans thought they wanted. Yeah.
No, that's why we're such assholes as fans, because
we're the big angry gods.
Yeah, we want what we want, and then when we get it, we're like, "Fuck you! You ruined it."
Yep. Unfucking pleasable.
Yeah, I know, right? Wait, didn't Fede Alvarez? He did Predators as well, right?
What?
I think he did.
Yeah. I know he did. Don't Breathe.
He did Don't Breathe. Dude, Don't Breathe was awesome. And they just finished filming the sequel, I think. And talk about evasion movies. That's cool.
Yeah. Now that was a totally different thing, but I thought that was only being talked about going into production at this point.
No, I saw something the other day that I think it's already been filmed.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably have to look it up, but I do think I saw that it was already filmed. I imagine the cast wasn't that big, so they probably didn't have to, do too much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
I thought we lost you there for a second.
Yeah, I tried to sneak in. I have to be right back. In the laptop swapping fiasco, I ended up not having the appropriate charger up here, so I had to fix that real quick.
We kept it going. We got on to Don't Breathe, which is phenomenal.
Yes. He's another one to look out for, and he keeps getting attached to remake things. I think is it Labyrinth right now, or did he end up not doing that? I can't remember.
Labyrinth he ended up passing on. And then he's attached to a Texas Chainsaw.
That's what it was,
project.
Oh, they need to stop.
But I think he's going to be a producer.
Stop with the Texas Chainsaw.
Oh, I thought you were like, oh shit, man, I got to go. House is on fire.
I think it would be if you had to fucking sit through another Texas Chainsaw remake.
It's just, that's a hard one to do. Like, I don't, like, there was just some magic to the first one.
Where do you fucking go?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was.
I mean, the second one's good and
the
fun.
second one, you have the people that love the second one too, but I think after that.
Yeah, just nothing has been good after the second one, I feel like.
Well, that's back to how far can you push something in all those directions, and the sequel already went there. I mean,
yeah,
because that is the Dennis Hopper one, right? It's been a long time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, Dennis Hopper chainsaw fights Leatherface at the end like a lightsaber battle. It's fucking badass.
I met Gunnar Hansen at one of the horror conventions. He was pretty cool.
It's fucking awesome.
No shit.
Yeah,
we got to go to some of these horror conventions.
My buddy's got a picture with him. I know. I met Doug Bradley too.
Nice.
It was funny because we were laughing because we saw him pulling up and he's got like his like rolling luggage and he looked sad. I'm like, hey, it's sad Pinhead. I also met Tony Todd there too. He's a big guy, dude. Very cool because of course, Candyman. Everybody loves Candyman, but I really like him in the Night of the Living Dead remake as well.
Yeah,
he was cool as Bedman. So good.
Yeah,
he was perfect for that.
Oh, it was perfectly done. I mean, his performance was top notch, man, and it's hard to beat Dwayne Jones too.
Yeah.
Embodying the same character, but Tony Todd was like made for that role, dude. The right amount of tough. And I like what they did with Barbara, where they made her stronger than she originally was in the original. So
they turned her into like your
Tom
normal
Savini
final girl. Oh yeah, definitely did.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is always a divisive one. How do you feel about? Oh, I just drew a blank. Robert Eggers.
We fried your brain. What's that?
How do you feel about Robert Eggers movies? The Witch and The Lighthouse.
He did The Witch and Lighthouse. Okay. I like The Witch. I didn't see Lighthouse. It was, I don't know if it's still on Prime, but I started to watch it one day and then something came up and I never got to finish it. So I only got like maybe 5 minutes into it. But I hear good things about The Lighthouse. And I hear like Robert Pattinson is like, you know, the new DiCaprio. He's like the guy that's just like killing it, you know?
He's fucking fantastic in it.
He is.
Yeah. And I love Willem Dafoe.
Oh, yeah. Everybody loves Willem Dafoe. I actually fell asleep on The Witch in theaters, and then the next 2 or 3 times I tried to watch it, I fell asleep. And then when I was like, we got to cover him for the podcast, everybody always brings him up. Everybody loves his movies, and I actually made myself sit through The Witch, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I went back and watched it a couple of times, and I loved Lighthouse. Josh, on the other hand, I think he hated Lighthouse. But
yeah, no. Well, Willem Dafoe is unbelievably good in that movie, but I don't
and
like
everything he's in.
Yeah,
especially Boondock Saints.
There was a firefight.
Wait,
oh, I knew that was coming.
I want to say something about Anna Taylor-Joy.
Oh yeah,
she is really good in The Witch, and especially in the Unbreakable trilogy.
Yeah,
she's really good in that too.
I was going to bring that up. I like her in Split, and you know, some people say she's like a new Scream Queen, and I want to see, you know, what else she does because she's great in them. And I even went and saw Marvel's New Mutants because I like that comic series.
Was that good?
I don't know how to answer that. I wish we would have got the hard R horror version of it instead of the PG-13 version that came out. I kind of liked it, but that's because I like that character Magic that she was playing, and I like her as an actress. And she was good in the movie, and it had some cool parts. Like I would wait to streaming on that one. Like, and if you're a Marvel fan, watch it. You know, but when you hear about the rated R horror version they originally made, and then it just got so neutered. Like, I want to see that version.
Money.
I know.
Money.
Well, it was also like Fox went back and forth on it, and then Disney bought Fox. And how about all this horror?
Isn't it funny what Disney did? They got rid of Fox name. They're just calling it 20th century.
Yeah. And isn't it funny how much
so dumb.
horror people end up doing comic book stuff as well?
Yeah.
Because you got like Sam Raimi doing
weird.
Spider-Man. Sam Raimi's doing Doctor Strange 2 now. He's working on it, right? James Gunn doing Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, you see this happen a lot, you know?
Yep. Yeah, the horror people, they get out there, man. You know, speaking of comic books, Garth Ennis, they did Preacher.
Yeah.
AMC did that. That was really cool.
I saw the first season of it. I liked it, and part of the second season, but that's one of them that kind of like fell off on me.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was another one that they just did too. The Boys.
Oh, I love The Boys.
Is awesome. The Boys is so good, and that's got awesome gore in it too.
Yeah, and we got the season finale
I'm not
tomorrow,
a comic
right?
guy. I have a small sliver of comic love, and The Boys is just badass.
The Boys is great, dude. It's everything that you hoped it could be and more.
Tomorrow is a great day for us because we get the Boys season finale, and The Haunting of Bly Manor comes out tomorrow.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. So some new Flanagan Haunted House action.
Yes.
We're also very close to the end of this first season of Lovecraft Country.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. God, now you made me think. I haven't finished The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, it's so
and
good.
I feel like a bad Flanagan fan. Yeah.
I loved it, and then by the end of the last episode, it makes you rethink the entire season, the whole show.
That's good.
Like I'm like,
I love how
But that's what he does. He's like, now that you're done, you got to go back and watch it 2 more times.
And there's so many hidden.
Now I really
every
gotta watch
episode has hidden ghost people in the background, like multiple times. It will fuck you up when you start to notice it.
Yes,
but
I'm glad too that that Henry Thomas is his Robert De Niro or Leo DiCaprio. You know, it's like Henry Thomas has been, I think, pretty much everything that he's made since Ouija. Too, right?
He uses a lot of the same people. When you watch Bly Manor, you can see the twins, right, from Haunting a Hill House is in it. You can see Thomas in it. I'm pretty sure with the creepy lady coming out of the water is his wife that's in everything that he makes, you know. So I think he likes to use.
He's got his tight little cluster.
One thing that was really interesting to me when you watch an interview with him and his wife on making Hush, Mike Flanagan, his wife, Kate Siegel, and John Gallagher Jr., who played the hunter in it, they got together and made that movie. And they were thinking that it would be really fun to every 2 or 3 years make another small, low-budget horror movie, no matter what they're doing. And they said they were going to do that as a group. And I don't think we've gotten that second one yet. Because it's been a lot of years since Hush. They were going to do Hush regularly, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but he blew the fuck up with, and then Netflix deals, like, where's the time?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But it would be, I would like to see him take a step back, kind of like how James Wan's making Malignant, which may or may not be good. We haven't seen it yet. But the fact that he's making all this money and he's like, you know what, I want to go back and make a Italian Giallo style flick. Right? Like, why the fuck not? Let's do it. Let's see it. Yeah,
right? No, you know what? I think Flanagan's the kind of guy that he just might do it. He probably hasn't had the time.
Yeah.
And especially now that it's all messed up and everything. But it for the movies that he's made, you can see the passion in like almost every frame of his movies. Like, this guy knows so much about, I think that it's good that he's getting the studios behind it, so he's got the money to do what he wants to do. But I also think that the passion will lead him to do smaller stuff too,
right?
Just for fun, because he likes doing it.
I feel like because all these
that money comes with strings.
Yeah. I feel like all the current modern horror movie directors though proved themselves making their own thing, and the studios tend to not fuck with any of them right now. They're like, yeah, you do what you want, it's going to work out. Right? I really feel like that happens. That's not normally what happens to horror movies. But a lot of these more recent ones, the studios don't interfere with Ari Aster. They don't mess with Robert Eggers. They don't mess with James Wan. They don't mess with Flanagan. They just let them make their movies. I know there's a director's cut that's like an hour longer of Dr. Sleep, but I don't know. I feel like that was a bigger demon because it's a pseudo sequel to The Shining while being a Stephen King book and all that. And I don't know how much of that was cut out just because it was fucking long, right? Like, that might have been more of a time thing. Because I still haven't sat down and watched the director's cut of that yet. But they do let them make their own thing.
I made the dumb move, dude. It was on HBO, right? So HBO has it on there, but then as an extra, they have the director's cut.
Okay.
Like, right below it. And I didn't see it. As soon as I finished the movie and turned it off, I look at my wife and I'm like, fuck, there was a director's cut this whole time. So now I actively look for that on there because they got Little Shop of Horrors, which one of my favorite movies of all time. And they actually have the director's cut on there as well.
Nice.
Same thing with The Hills Have Eyes. If you're fans of the remake, there's the director's cut on there and the theatrical cut as well. Which, if you guys haven't seen it, you should check it out.
I get scared of remakes. I think Rob Zombie is a big part of that, but because of what he did.
I will give you that all the way, dude. And I tried to watch House of a Thousand Corpses the other day, and I had to turn it off. It really wasn't that good.
I think his Halloween movie was a really good horror movie. I think it was a shitty Halloween remake.
Yeah. Well, at least they brought back Danielle Harris.
Yeah, that was a cool part.
Yeah. Some of this is because of my wife, because she's got a hard on for anything he does. But anyways, we've talked about this before on the podcast. I don't think what Rob Zombie's done is like a slap in the face to the genre or anything like that. I think he comes from an angle as a fan. Yeah. And his own movies are his own thing, and you know what you're getting. Like, you were going to the 70s, you were going to a Manson-esque type thing, and there's going to be some mind-bending, fucked up shit in it, or you're going to go way off into the dark dabbling weirdness of his mind, and those aren't the better movies. I don't think he should be given properties that already exist. Let him do what he does and leave him there.
Yeah.
He's better there.
Yeah. That's a fair statement right there.
We've talked about this in the past
Hopefully
before.
Rob's not listening.
Yeah, I know. We've had to say that a couple times before. It's like, oh God, I hope he's not listening. Like I said, I like his movie. I just don't like the Halloween remake. But do you think it's interesting that all the current modern like horror directors that we're gushing over are also the writers of their movies?
Oh yeah. I think so all the way. Because
it's always a writer director.
Yeah. And a lot of the old
really
classics were that way too, though. Like Wes Craven writing and directing Nightmare on Elm Street, John Carpenter. I mean, he had Deborah Hill with them, but doing Halloween, like they were the directors doing it. And then, you just had this huge window of like different people writing and directing. And I don't know, I feel like it takes both a lot with horror because you have to be so creative with it. And you have the budget constraints and stuff like that. So you have to be able to envision everything perfectly in your head and be the guy that came up with it and be able to bend it, right, to be able to fit all your constraints. And I just don't think it turns out as well when you see directed by this person, written by this person.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly agree with you there. Because you just named a couple and you think about how great they are, unless you're talking about like The Exorcist,
right?
Which was what, William Blatty, and that movie's just, and we never touched upon that one, but that's a fine example of horror right there.
That's
I
another
never
one.
watched that movie until we were doing the podcast.
Really? It's great. Did you watch the director's cut or the original?
That's another one. The director's cut's amazing.
I watched whatever was streaming.
Okay. It's so good, dude. I've actually been to those steps. They're in Georgetown, right outside of DC, and I took a picture of there. I was like, dude, it's awesome being here. Like,
nice.
Looking up there. Yeah. That is so sweet. I was living in Virginia at the time, so it really wasn't that far of a drive.
Yeah.
But like, I gotta go. I gotta check it out. Writing your own film and directing it, and you got that love and that passion there. And I never considered, but like you said, you play out the movie in your head. You know what you need to have to get the movie done. It's like taking the Robert Rodriguez approach.
Yeah.
Like that guy's the one man band, and he comes in under budget every time because he knows I'll use whatever I can. And a lot of those cats did that. Like, we keep on coming back to Evil Dead, but Evil Dead was like, okay, we got a cabin. Let's use that and write around that,
Yeah.
And a lot of those, younger horror movies are like, hey, who do we know that has stuff that we can use? How can we raise a little bit of money? And we'll create an idea there. And then that's what happens. And they make something cool, dude, that, if you had wrote a script with all these big things in there and you had to get funding for it, probably would have never happened and been that special.
It becomes a passion project.
Yeah.
When those writer directors, they have the whole vision. It's their baby, so they have the passion. And keep in mind that a lot of these guys are, if not editing, at least literally there for the editing, and it's not being shipped off somewhere else. And it has their love in it. And nothing. There's some duos out there that have made magic, but there's nothing.
Right.
Nothing as good as a writer director without constraints. And the budget is not the constraint. I'm talking about the studio saying you can't do that. You have to use this actor because he's hot right now. That kind of bullshit. You take all that away, and that's how you get, Evil Dead. That's how you get, to a lesser degree, Nightmare on Elm Street.
You just brought up
but that's it, and it's there.
You just brought up another interesting point, how important editing is on horror. And I feel like that's why Flanagan excels. I know we all keep gushing all over him, but he was an editor before he started making his own movies. And he edits his own films, if I remember correctly. Like, I think he actually edits all of them himself. And that's a very powerful piece, I feel like, too.
Yep.
Yep.
Pacing is one of the most important things in horror.
When you
It's so critical, especially to guys like me that are assholes about
right,
it.
you were talking about passion projects.
That's what separates the shit from the good ones.
Right.
You know?
You were talking about passion you were talking about passion projects, and I always think of Peter Jackson with Bad Taste, because not only did he write and direct it, but he made all the props himself in his house. Like he made wooden guns.
It's been over 4 years.
I know,
making
made
it.
all the mask in his mom's oven for the aliens and like all that shit.
And look where he is today.
I know.
Man. Like, yeah. Oh, you know who's and not in horror at all, but if you fly just west, you got Taika Waititi, who's another one of those guys.
Yeah.
I was going to bring What We Do in the Shadows as another one that took forever.
I guess we could put that in the horror because that's
we covered it under horror comedies.
Horror elements. Yes,
I almost threw that in under vampires
that would
and
be my
horror
top
comedies
3
tonight. I almost used it for both categories.
Yes, yes, that goes in there all the way by far, and
Now,
it's got werewolves too.
Oh yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And there's not much of a story there. It just kind of happens for a while and then it's over, but it's still fun.
I remember when
hilarious.
I remember we covered that movie, like when Josh watched it, because it was on my list of horror comedies for one of our horror comedy episodes. He's like, "How are you going to cover a movie that's just a documentary where they're interviewing people?" I'm like, "I'll find a way." And you just got to tell their stories, man. It's just hilarious how it all comes together. It's just a brilliantly made movie. And even his non-horror movies, he's another one of those like just amazing directors.
Oh, totally. I mean, he brought Thor back.
I know.
Which 2 is actually 1 and 2 are really not that great.
No, not at all.
But 3 is amazing.
Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite Marvel movies, and it's because it's fucking hilarious
It's
the
so
entire
good.
time. Him and Chris Hemsworth were meant to work together. He made Hitler lovable in a movie. I mean, come the fuck on.
Yes, he did.
Jojo Rabbit.
What a beautiful movie, man. What a beautiful.
I still haven't seen that.
That's good.
Watch it. If you got HBO, it's on HBO right now. It's great.
They don't have that cable stuff out where I'm out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a great director. He's making a Star
What
Wars
was
movie.
his other?
I'm excited about that. So.
Yeah, well, he directed an episode of The Mandalorian as well as playing characters on there and stuff.
And they gave him a movie, so he gets to write and direct his own Star Wars movie. That's probably going to be
going to be
fantastic.
amazing. Yes. Way to actually, way to bring back Star Wars, by the way. I mean, they got the right group of people together on Mandalorian. And I'm really excited for Star Wars now again, because I was losing kind of hope for a while there. I think until Rogue One.
Yeah.
And then Rogue One was like,
if you look at my office, it's covered in horror stuff and Star Wars stuff. It's just like a huge, like just a pot of stuff, just all mixed together. And those are my 2 real big passions. And it's really interesting to see that. It is doing a good job. Like, it went downhill a little bit with the new movies while coming back up with the cartoons and the Mandalorian show, just knocking it out the park. So,
yes.
So you got Jon Favreau involved.
Actually,
so
wait, it's October. Isn't it supposed to come out this
the
month?
30th?
Yes.
Night before Halloween.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, yeah. My man, I'm excited.
Yeah, I still haven't watched any of those. To me, there's the original trilogy, and then the prequels fucked it up so much that I haven't given anything else
Watch
a
The
chance.
Mandalorian. You're going to be.
We grew up in that. Like, when you talk to younger Star Wars fans and they talk about the prequels, because they were young when those came out, and that's their trilogy. You know,
that blows my mind.
It does, doesn't it? I remember 1999, man, when Phantom Menace came out, and I left the theater like, well, what did I just? Okay. Don't even think about it. There's more coming. It wasn't, this one day.
Misa ruined Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
I left that movie going, Darth Maul is badass. But.
Oh, he is. He's totally badass, and then he gets taken out. Okay, I want to tell you guys something real quick. I defended them still, and Attack of the Clones especially. But one day we were hanging out at a friend's house, and we were fucking baked as shit, and we were watching. It was the scene in the arena where he's trying to save Padme and stuff.
The Battle of Geonosis.
And my friend's like, no, not in Juno. It was like when they put out those bad CG creatures to like attack.
And all the Jedi come in.
Anakin and stuff, and all the Jedi come in. Yeah. So we're watching this, right? And my buddy looks at me. He's like, "Dude, admit it." I was like, "Admit what?" He's like, "Listen to the dialogue. It's really bad." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking?" And then he's like, "Dude, just listen." And I was listening. I was like, "You're right. It's actually pretty terrible, man. Like when you really shuck your fandom for a second and you sit down and listen to it, like it's really not that good."
When there's lines that you and
in the prequels,
Ewan McGregor can't say, there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Another guy to be thankful for, Ewan McGregor. He's the man. You know what though? We've been doing this for a long time. I know.
This is what happens to our podcast episodes. That's how they end up being so long. Right? I did want to say this.
What's funny is,
I was gonna say this might involve a little bit of editing to move something to the front, but before my shit fucked up the first time, you mentioned that we had a horror podcast and stuff, and then we didn't do that when we started.
No, that's what I'm getting to. Okay. Yeah. So, I usually, at the end of the show, I'll do like, ask you social media and stuff. I always ask everybody what the recommendations are. Besides what we talked, we gave a lot of recommendations in here. But non-horror, what do you recommend? Like, what are you guys into? What's the bee's knees? Like, what would you say? Again, non-horror, just it could be anything like you're into and you want people to know about and check out. So let's start with Jessie.
I'm a big Star Wars and Marvel guy, which I think I kind of beat those dead horses throughout this episode. So I have a lot of fun with those. I'm really excited for Mandalorian coming back. But if we're talking about current things on right now that's not horror, it'd have to be The Boys.
It doesn't have to be TV. It could be like anything. It could be whatever. Like if you're into some fad diet or something.
Unfortunately, it's not unfortunately. Movies are one of my favorite things. So I do a lot of movies and TV shows, and I play a bunch of video games, and I listen to punk music. So those are the things I like to do. And I have kids now that I get to do the Star Wars and video game stuff with, and I'll torture them with horror when they get a little bit older. But I do play a lot of games when I have time. So right now I'm playing Star Wars Squadrons because it's kind of badass.
Nice. All right, I'm going to put all these in the show notes too, so that people know exactly what they should be looking out for.
And Cobra Kai season 3, you got to wait on that one, man.
I'm in season 2 right now.
Oh, it's so good.
And what a love letter! I love it. Yeah.
It's a lot the same for me, and that's because when Jessie and I, as being cousins and then becoming friends, you got common interests. We played in punk bands together for years, and never went anywhere. But we played lots of video games, and that's still, other than movies and fucking work, it's retro video gaming. For me, I'm a collector and do a lot of playing. Right now, I'm currently playing through Fear Effect on PlayStation. Playing through that again and making and listening to music. There's a lot of bland, stale shit out there, just like it is for everybody every decade, and even a big section of the punk genre. But at least there's a lot of shit out there that sounds like shit from my youth, and that's all it is, because that's what happens to every generation, and I'm wise enough to admit it, but that's what I'm into.
Nice. And our show eats into a lot of time, too, because we cover multiple movies an episode, right? So, we have to watch them over and over again and take notes, and then we got to record them, and hell, I end up spending a week just editing those things. That takes away from some of the other stuff, but we love hanging out and talking about the horror movies, so it's it's a fun time sink.
It is. And it's the best because you can just so easily, fluidly move from one thing to the next just because you love it so much. And you start talking about one thing and then you think about something else. And I'm so glad to have this conversation with you because I don't know anybody in real life, especially because I'm here in Michigan, just moved here a couple of years ago, haven't met that person that I could have a real life interaction conversation and just talk horror
right
with, so it's been a blast because I've had to hold it in. This was great, guys, and I want to thank you so much. I have a recommendation. Let me ask you this first. Do you listen to metal at all or just punk?
Mainly just punk for me. I mean, sometimes a crossover sometimes, but
and it's the same for me. And this is, I'm going to get bashed on so hard for this, but like stuff more in the vein of like, I think like Avenged Sevenfold is about as far towards metal as I go, and that's blasphemy to some people. But
Wow, I like them. They're awesome.
Now I respect, and I get into weird shit into metal. Like I respect like Pantera and things going that direction, and like even all the way off into like Sepultura and stuff like that. But it was never really my jam, and I was never one of those that was like, yeah, Metallica. Like, no, but I respect Megadeth. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I respect Dave Mustaine, but that's a whole nother thing. There's dabblings in metal, and like Jessie said, some of the stuff that's closer together or crossover stuff more so than traditional metalhead type stuff.
And I'd hang out with Scott Ian any day of the week, I think.
Well, I was going to say, I think being into punk, like the old thrash metal of the 80s, like you said, Megadeth, and Megadeth had the classic thrash vibe, which came out of punk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing with Anthrax, I was gonna, if you guys were in the metal, I would say like my most glowing recommendation right now is I really love this band Trivium. If you're not into like, hard metal, they have this album called The Crusade, which is their like thrash metal album, and it's like no harsh vocals. It's singing. It's awesome. It's got a very kind of thrash like punk feel to it. Just in the way that they're playing, because it's more thrash oriented than they usually are. But their newest album is just a masterpiece, and they change up their style. So it's not like one thing every song. Like every song is a little bit different, but it's like, the spirit of punk, which you guys like, I find in metal, it's like that outlet.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you can, like, you want to punch somebody in the face, but and you want to run around like Trivium. I always say, like, my analogy for them is like, it's like their music will punch you in the face, but then it will hold you. Like when you were wrestling your brother or sister when they were a kid and you hurt them, and you're like, shh, you're okay. Like, like that's how beautiful it is. Like, it's like aggressive and badass, but then there's these very beautiful parts, and it's like lulling you into this sense that you're okay. And then it will come back and just like, ratchet it up again. So, just, give them a listen, see what you think. I think they're one of the most interesting metal bands out there, and like by far the best album this year. So
an interesting band for me. I've always hated electronic music for the most part, other than like horror movie scores, right, with synth. And I recently discovered Dance with the Dead.
Goblins.
And, well, I didn't listen to Goblins, but I recently discovered Dance with the Dead, and they got the nice, like, Carpenter-style synth while you got two guys playing metal guitar. So that's probably as close as I currently get to metal. But they're really fun if you want to look them up. But they're guys that grew up watching horror movies and played in punk and metal bands, and they're also big Star Wars nerds. And they let fans make all their horror posters, and they just make creepy ass like synth lines, and then they just shred guitar on top of it. And it's a lot of fun to listen to mindlessly. There's no lyrics or anything because it's electronic music, but they're a good time too if you're a horror fan and like metal. You'd probably like them.
All right, I'm going to definitely check them out. All right, so now is the time. So I want you guys to tell everybody, you talked about it a little bit or kind of peppered throughout here, but tell everybody about the podcast and how they can reach you, how to find you on social media, and where they can find the podcast and everything.
So the podcast is called Slice by Slice, and we pretty much only cover horror movies except for films that touch into horror, like dark fantasy and sometimes sci-fi when we do that. And we try to keep it interesting, so each episode is categorized. So we'll do like a subgenre, say vampire flicks, one episode, and then the next episode we'll pick a director, and we'll just do some of that director's movies and tell their backstory. And then we'll throw a franchise in, and we repeat. And we think it's a nice way to break it down and let you pick from this giant pool of horror movies. And you can download us pretty much anywhere. I think I have us on everything under Slice by Slice, and all of our social media is S by S Podcast. And Josh, you got anything you want to add to that, or?
No, that's it. I mean, we're, like you said, we're pretty much everywhere from, iHeart all the way to Spotify, and at S by S or S by S podcast at gmail.com. Those two things will get you everywhere.
And
nice. I'm going to link it all in the show notes.
We appreciate that.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, towards the end of the year, like November, December, we usually take a break for a little bit to prep for a big one for the next year. So we're about to hit episode 50 next week. So that's a big one for us. And because we go every other week, and we're going to wrap up the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And other than doing like a Halloween episode and a Christmas episode, we're going to be doing a lot of prep work for the beginning of next year. So any new listeners, it's a good time to catch up on that backlog.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a perfect time to binge the show. So
it was really interesting.
You got a lot of time.
I know. It's really interesting because when I first decided to do the show, I was going to have a different guest host. And I'm like, every episode. And I was like, why didn't I ask Josh? He's my fucking cousin, and we talk about horror movies every day. And the first couple, we just did slashers, and it's a very serious, almost film school approach. And then somewhere in a few episodes, we turned into a comedy podcast. They just got long and lots of nonsense, but everybody seems to have a good time listening to them. So
that's awesome, and I can't wait for people that have never heard of you guys to come check it out, man. You know, because I've had a great time talking with you guys today too, and you guys know your stuff. So I can say this, like, I don't know if we were to have a pissing contest, who knew more? I would say you guys would know more, definitely. And I know a lot, but I think your knowledge is great. So if you're a horror fan, if you are on the fence, if you've never watched a horror movie in your life, you got to definitely check out Slice by Slice, because these guys are legit, you know. And the fact that you guys break it down by franchises and directors, I think that's a neat way to approach it, rather than just movie review by movie review, or, you know, a couple movies at a time that are like unrelated. The fact is, you can really delve into those little finer details, which is nice. So you're going to really break it down for people.
And we
love it.
We might make lots of jokes while we're going along the way, but we do a lot of research on them. We go pretty deep on most of the movies. And we like to make the joke that Jessie, you know, myself has a, you know, red CSI yarn string for some of the movies. Like when I did we went through the entire Paranormal Activity franchise. And then I explained chronologically how each piece from different movies connected. And that was just like one of the hardest fucking things ever. But it was so much fun because you can do that with horror movies. But it is kind of nice that new listeners, that if they want to find out if they like our show or not, you can kind of cherry pick a category on there. It's like, well, I like that franchise, or I like, you know, ghost stories, right? And you can pick them. So I feel like it's a nice little slice there, right, that you can take and check it out. So
that's right, man. All right, guys. Well, I know we got to get back to life.
Yeah,
and stuff,
unfortunately.
So I won't talk your ear off anymore. Thanks again so much for coming by. Like I said, I'm going to link everything in the show notes so everybody can get in touch with you guys easily and check out the show.
We appreciate it,
and
thanks for having us and having
thank
this
you so much for having us on, man.
Yeah, and it was really nice to have somebody so knowledgeable as well on the genre to talk to, because it's usually just us doing it with each other. So.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is when we were talking before Jessie got on, where I was asking, is like, is this PG? Because I'd listened to some of your stuff, and I'm like, what kind of thing is this going to be? And then you start talking, I was like, yeah, I got to fucking talk about horror with somebody. Like, oh, thank God.
we could have done PG if we had to, but it was like, I meant to ask you that early on.
You can't.
Yeah,
you can't.
Well, it's hard to talk about movies where people are getting disemboweled, and then like the person's offended if you say fuck, right? Like.
Yeah, it's like, and how do you think Jesus feels about that?
Jesus wept. Wow, we didn't even talk about Hellraiser.
I know.
All right.
Oh, just the first one. Ignore the rest.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, guys. If anything in the future, if you need to take a break from talking to each other, need a third party, just fucking let me know. We see that it's really easy. So, and
absolutely.
I would definitely like to have you guys back in the future as well.
We would love to do it again.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Jessie, but we'd love to have you on sometime.
Yeah.
That sounds good, man.
And for Halloween last year, we interviewed people. We had a list of questions, and it was really fun to find out what people thought. And I don't know if we're going to do that this year because Josh can't have his normal Halloween party with the pandemic going on. But that'd be really nice to have you on there where we have we kind of did it a little bit here, you know, but to break it down where it's actually written out and stuff, that'd be fun to do. And especially if we start doing like side stuff, like doing actual, because we don't do reviews, we do breakdowns, you know, so it'd be fun like to get extra party in on that. So I think we should definitely collaborate again.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm in. And I'm glad you write it down because I'm off the cuff. So I'm like just constantly trying to think of something, you know, but having a list of stuff and I want you to return the favor of really put me in a corner, like I did for you guys on certain things. So like force answers out of me.
We'll definitely plug this episode when we record our episode this weekend. So we'll make sure to cross-reference here. So
sounds good, man.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again, guys, and have a great night. All right.
Thanks, and you too.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. If you want more Can't Recommend Enough, you can check us out at Twitter at Always Recommend or on Instagram or Facebook at Can't Recommend Enough. Please feel free, follow us there, like stuff, go there for more recommendations, more cool stuff. Always be posting stuff and recommending all types of things. So check it out, follow, and if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like the videos if you're listening to it on there. Also, subscribe to the podcast on the player that you're listening to, and that way you can get updated whenever a new show comes out. But you also, in the social media, get updates when new episodes drop as well. So check it out. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. Have a great day.